Chapter 3684. This news naturally spread to Yi Shiwen's ears. Yi Shiwen naturally understood that he had provoked public anger. Perhaps other people would show mercy and leave a way out for him, but Yi Shiwen didn't have such thoughts. Countless experiences and lessons had taught him what the consequences of doing so would be. Since they had chosen to kill him and seize the supreme ancestral symbol, they had to be prepared to pay the price. In this world, there was no such thing as a free lunch. Of course, the bigger reason was that Yi Shiwen had given them a feeling of sympathy for the death of a rabbit. They also coveted the supreme ancestral symbol. Therefore, Yi Shiwen's current actions naturally made them feel displeased. Moreover, from the battle that Yi Shiwen had displayed, an ordinary Ninth Realm expert was no match for Yi Shiwen. Even a peak Ninth Realm expert would be in danger. During this period of time, many functions of the supreme ancestral symbol had become known to everyone. With such a trump card that could enhance one's combat power, even an ordinary peak Ninth Realm expert might not be a match for it. Moreover, the Heavenly Masters were not fools. Following the clues, they quickly found out that the people who spread the rumors were Crimson Serpent Demon and the other two peak Heavenly Masters. The strength of the three of them could be said to stand at the peak of all the Heavenly Masters in the universe. Even a peak Heavenly Master would not have an easy time against the three of them if they joined forces. They might even die. However, Yi Shiwen had forced the three of them to spread rumors to kill him with a borrowed knife. It was not difficult to imagine the meaning behind this. Yi Shiwen must be a powerful existence that even the three of them would find it difficult to take down. This was why the peak Heavenly Masters came up with the idea of joining forces. As for the source of the rumors, the Crimson Serpent Demon and the other two peak Heavenly Masters were naturally another target of resentment. However, the Crimson Serpent Demon and the other two peak Heavenly Masters were undoubtedly peak Heavenly Masters. It seemed that they were much more difficult to deal with than Yi Shiwen, who was suspected to have the combat power of a peak Heavenly Master. Even if the new students were dissatisfied, they did not dare to attack the three peak Heavenly Masters. Otherwise, they might be killed by the three peak Heavenly Masters. But no matter what, the alliance against Yi Shiwen had still been established. As soon as it was established, it shook the entire Eratomb. Although it was only an alliance formed by a few peak Heavenly Venerables who coveted the supreme ancestral symbol, it was still an eye-catching force in the current situation of the Eratomb. In the face of such a dangerous situation, Yi Shiwen didn't seem to be afraid at all. Not only did he not intend to dodge, but on the contrary, he directly spoke. 3 days later, at the center of several dead epochs, the Empyreans of the world were waiting to kill them. The center of the intersection of several eras was actually the most dangerous place. Yi Shiwen had escaped into the boundless crack last time, and this time, Yi Shiwen was going to meet the Celestial Masters here. Once this news spread, it caused a huge commotion. Countless experts rushed to the core of the epic tomb, the Endless Cracks. At the edge of the core, on a desolate divine mountain, a figure appeared on the peak. This desolate divine mountain had been desolate for many years. With the death of the era, this divine mountain had been drained of its last vitality. It was a miracle that it did not collapse on the spot. Who else could the person who appeared on the divine mountain be but Yi Shiwen? Yi Shiwen held a pot of immortal wine in his hand and took a sip. He immediately felt comfortable, as if all the pores on his body had opened up. Ha! It's really been a long time. It's worthy of being a fine wine from the Fortune Divine Court. Yi Shiwen laughed heartily and looked at the surrounding universe. In the depths of the changing space, there were incomparably powerful figures. They were the Celestial Venerables. It seemed like the main characters hadn't arrived yet, but the onlookers had already arrived. However, they seemed to know how dangerous Yi Shiwen was. So, they didn't dare to approach Yi Shiwen at all. They only dared to look at him from thousands of miles away. Such a distance could give them a sense of security. However, they also knew that this distance was no different from being right in front of them. Yi Shiwen could reach them in a single charge. Suddenly, an immortal figure appeared in the void in the distance. She stepped on a rainbow bridge and arrived in front of the divine mountain. With just one step, she arrived in front of Yishiwen. This woman was dressed in white and had black hair. Her facial features were exquisite and flawless. She did not look like a creature of the mortal world. She should be a fairy from the heavens. Who else could it be but Senior Heaven Talisman Immortal? Taoist friend, it's not wise to appear at this time. Yishiwen glanced at Senior Heaven Talisman Immortal. This divine mountain had become the focus of countless people. Senior Heaven Talisman Immortal was a wanted target of the Devil Dao era. His appearance here would obviously attract the attention of the Devil Dao era. This time, the experts from the Devil Dao era were not just Scarlet Serpent Demon alone. The danger of doing this was obvious. The supreme ancestral symbol is the supreme treasure of our Talisman Dao era. Aren't they looking down on our Talisman Dao era by fighting over it like this? Although our Talisman Dao era has been destroyed, it is not to the point of being bullied to this extent and not fighting back. Senior Heaven Talisman Immortal explained. She seemed to be speaking to Yishiwen, but also to the heavenly venerables watching in the void. Although the Talisman Dao era had been destroyed, as long as Senior Heaven Talisman Immortal still existed, the deterrent force of the Talisman Dao era would still exist. Senior Heaven Talisman Immortal's white palm grabbed the void, and an exquisite white porcelain wine cup appeared. She handed it to Yishiwen. Yishiwen smiled and poured the wine from the wine pot into the wine cup. Senior Heaven Talisman Immortal took the wine cup and placed it in front of her nose. She sniffed and smelled a refreshing fragrance. She could not help but exclaim, "Good wine indeed." After saying that, Senior Heaven Talisman Immortal drank the wine in one gulp. Rather than me, you're the one who is unwise. You clearly know that they plan to kill you and seize the supreme ancestral symbol, but you still dare to stay here. Aren't you afraid of death? Senior Heaven Talisman Immortal said. Previously, for peak heavenly venerables joined forces to force one to flee and the other to suffer heavy injuries. Moreover, the experts that came this time were definitely not just 4 peak heavenly venerables. With such a lineup, it was quite unwise for Yishiwen to come out so casually like this. Kill me? That depends on whether they have the ability to do so. Moreover, they want to kill me. In fact, I also want to kill. A man should kill. His immortal achievements are all in killing. Yishiwen drank a mouthful of immortal wine and said confidently, "They treat me as prey. How do they know that I also treat them as prey?" Yishiwen's words spread throughout the universe. The heavenly venerables hiding thousands of miles away naturally heard Yishiwen's words and couldn't help but snort coldly. Arrogant. Such arrogance. You are really courting death. Amongst the spectating heavenly sovereigns, many of them were still hoping that they would be lucky enough to obtain the supreme ancestral symbol. It would naturally be great if they could obtain the supreme ancestral symbol. Now that they heard Yishiwen's words, they were naturally very unhappy. Ha ha! Revered martial artist, you are not kind. You actually stole such good wine from the Fortune Divine Court. Along with a hearty laughter, a figure wearing an imperial robe appeared in the void. From the moment he appeared, the space around him froze. It was as if the power of a divine artifact had bound the space around him. That boundless pressure was so great that even the heavens and earth would have to submit before him. So, it's a middle heavenly venerable. Yishiwen took a look and immediately knew who the person was. He grabbed the void and grabbed a wine cup and then filled it up. It was actually a middle heavenly venerable. Originally, Yishiwen thought that the middle heavenly venerable wouldn't be able to come because the situation in the Fortune Divine Dynasty was considered stable now. However, it wasn't that there was no crisis. Just suppressing the Chaos Overlord was enough of a headache. However, in the end, the middle heavenly venerate still felt that the matter of Saint Monarch Absolute Heaven's inheritance was more important. Even if the Chaos Overlord escaped, it would at most turn the Fortune God Dynasty upside down. That was all. It wouldn't really hurt the Fortune God Dynasty or cause the destruction of the Fortune God Dynasty. However, if the old monsters and antiques of the various ancient eras were to succeed, then the entire martial Dao era might be destroyed. It was obvious which was more important. I didn't expect to be able to drink such good wine here. The middle heavenly venerable took the wine cup that Yishiwen handed over and drained it in one gulp. A satisfied smile appeared on his face. I heard that some clowns are trying to make things difficult for fellow Taoists. I think they must be tired of living, daring to go against my fortune divine dynasty. Going against fellow Taoists is the same as going against my fortune divine dynasty. I want to see who has the guts to do so. The middle heavenly venerable's cold gaze swept across the void. On the surface, the figures of the Supremes and heavenly venerables were hidden in the void. Some of these people were onlookers, some were planning to take advantage of the situation, and some were planning to personally participate in the battle. However, when they saw the middle heavenly venerable's gaze, they couldn't help but subconsciously avert their eyes. This kind of pressure was too heavy. Obviously, compared to Yishiwen, the middle heavenly venerable was undoubtedly more terrifying. The middle heavenly venerable had been famous for many years. He had traveled the entire era's battlefield and fought with many heavenly venerables of the ancient eras. In terms of strength, everyone was very clear that he was very terrifying. Now, the middle heavenly venerable was obviously supporting martial venerable Yishiwen. This was another matter altogether. Chapter 3685. The peak heavenly venerables of the various ancient epochs had joined hands to kill Yishiwen with great fanfare. Yishiwen's supreme ancestral symbol was only one of the reasons. In fact, Yishiwen had killed too many people before, causing public indignation. Perhaps they also wanted to kill Yishiwen, the rising star of the martial epoch. Yishiwen had only reached the Tao for a few years, but he was already so powerful. Now might be the last chance to kill him. Experts like middle heavenly venerables were even more powerful than ordinary peak heavenly venerables. Naturally, they could not do anything to them. However, Yishiwen was different. Although he had displayed the combat prowess of a peak heavenly venerables, in reality, he had borrowed the power of the supreme ancestral symbol. He had not grown to the true peak, which gave them room to maneuver. With Yishiwen's current strength, he had already forced the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerables and the other great heavenly venerables to such an extent. If he grew up, it would be terrible. Therefore, many people gave birth to the idea of eradicating Yishiwen. The martial epochs were not ignorant of the thoughts of the peak heavenly venerables of the ancient epochs. This was why the middle heavenly venerables came to support Yishiwen. When Yishiwen grew up, he would be a peerless expert. This was simply bad news for the many ancient epochs. However, for the martial epochs, it was great news. In the clash of the ancient epochs, ordinary experts could not be of much use. They could only win by numbers. However, heavenly venerables already had the ability to change the situation. Peak heavenly venerables were a huge deterrent. Suddenly, someone in the void said, "Middle heavenly venerables, I think you are too overbearing. He killed so many of our people. Are we just going to let it go like this? There has always been a balance between us and the martial epochs. He is too much." The middle heavenly venerables immediately looked over. However, that person was hidden in the crowd. He could not find him at all. Clearly, that person had taken precautions before speaking. Balance? Balance my ass. Middle Sky Sovereign sneered. Why did those old fellows from the ancient era come here? Wasn't it because they wanted to find the inheritance of sage absolute heaven to kill their heavenly Tao? At this point, what was there to talk about balance? If I didn't have any greed, I wouldn't have died. But if I had greed and couldn't recognize my own strength, then I would have died. So what if I died? The Middle Empyrean didn't give him any face at all. Today, our fortune divine dynasty has secured Wuzun. If you clowns still dare to jump out, then don't blame me for being ruthless. The middle celestial sovereign said. The middle heavenly venerate's words represented the fortune god dynasty's attitude. Although the fortune god dynasty couldn't represent the entire martial epoch, it was close. After all, the fortune god dynasty was the ruler of the martial epoch. Many people had to think twice before acting whether they could withstand the fortune god dynasty's vengeance. The Fortune Divine Dynasty's strength far surpassed many ancient eras. Middle Heavenly Venerate, you are too overbearing. Aren't you afraid that we will join forces to deal with your Fortune God Dynasty? It was this voice again. However, before his voice faded away, Yi Xuan, who was originally sitting on the mountain peak and drinking wine, suddenly made a move. In the void, a giant sword that was thousands of miles long suddenly emerged. That magnificent scene was extremely terrifying. Boom! The giant sword suddenly fell and smashed into the void. In the void, a figure was swept by the giant sword and fell out of the void. It was a middle-aged man. He looked at Yi Shiwen in disbelief. He was actually discovered from thousands of miles away. That's right, he was the one who provoked them earlier. He thought that he had hidden himself very well. Even the Middle Heavenly Venerate couldn't find him. But now, Yi Shiwen found him and forced him out of the void with a sword. Before he could react, he saw that the Middle Heavenly Venerate had rushed in front of him in an instant. His big hand suddenly grabbed the middle-aged man's neck and instantly caught him. Although he was also a Heavenly Venerate, he was just an ordinary Heavenly Venerate. Compared to a top master like the Middle Heavenly Venerate, the difference was too big. He was caught in the Middle Heavenly Venerate's hand in an instant. A clown like you actually dared to jump out. You really don't want to live. The Middle Heavenly Venerate grabbed the middle-aged Heavenly Venerate and exploded into a cloud of blood mist. It was like a bloody rain that fell into this lonely era. Many people couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts when they saw this scene. Whether it was Yi Shiwen forcing a Heavenly Venerate out with a sword or the Middle Heavenly Venerate grabbing a Heavenly Venerate to death, it made them truly aware of the gap between them. These two were already outstanding Heavenly Venerates. They weren't their opponents at all. It wouldn't be so easy to take advantage of them. At this time, Yi Shiwen stood up with his hands clasped behind his back. The astral wind blew on his body, causing his clothes to flutter. His gaze was deep and sharp, like a steel knife, as it ruthlessly swept over the Heavenly Venerable's body. I am here now. If you want to kill me, feel free to come. Don't be sneaky like a clown. I am here, waiting for the heroes of the world to come and kill me. Yi Shiwen's declaration was like the supreme law of the world. It shocked all the Heavenly Venerates who were watching. How domineering was this? Similarly, how confident was this? There were so many heroes in the world, but he wasn't afraid. He had the courage to compete with the heroes of the world. Just when everyone was shocked by the two of them, a figure slowly emerged. Yi Shiwen's pupils suddenly shrank. This figure was too familiar. Demon Venerate Luoho. Yes, it was the supreme ruler of the current demon era, Demon Venerate Luoho. Originally, Yi Shiwen didn't know many things about the demon era. However, after several confrontations, he went back and found a lot of information. He also understood that the current demon era wasn't very united, but among these demon venerates, Demon Venerate Luoho was the leader. His status was almost the same as the Middle Heavenly Venerates in the Fortune God Dynasty. Previously, Yi Shiwen had killed Demon Venerate Luoho's incarnation. However, the difference between Demon Venerate Luoho's incarnation and his true body was too great. Demon Venerate Luoho's incarnation was only equivalent to the strength of the seventh realm. However, his true body was a different matter. It definitely had the strength of an ordinary peak Heavenly Venerate. Just a gaze from him caused the void to fluctuate violently, as if it was being crushed by a terrifying power. There was only one word to describe it: powerful. It was not inferior to the tyrannical strength of a Middle Heavenly Venerate. Demon Venerate Luoho took a deep look at Yi Shiwen. There was a profound look in his eyes. In his original impression, Yi Shiwen was just a guy who was lucky enough to obtain the supreme ancestral symbol. Although he had killed his incarnation, it was only an incarnation. In front of his true body, Yi Shiwen was still vulnerable. However, when they met again, Yi Shiwen had displayed a powerful strength that was completely different from what he had previously known. Even with Demon Venerate Scarlet Serpent's powerful strength, he was not a match for Yi Shiwen at all. He had no choice but to kill others with a borrowed knife. He had pulled many people onto the same boat to deal with Yishiwen. Unknowingly, Yishiwen had obtained such unimaginable strength almost in the blink of an eye. Even with his vast experience, he couldn't help but express his amazement. However, his gaze only stayed on Yishiwen for a short while. Then, he looked at the Middle Heavenly Venerate and said, "Middle Heavenly Venerate, why do you have to make things difficult for these people? Is it necessary?" Demon Venerate Luoho said faintly. Although it seemed like he was speaking for these people, his tone was completely dismissive. There was even a hint of contempt in it. It was as if making things difficult for these people was simply degrading his status. The gains did not make up for the losses. Many heavenly venerates felt sullen. However, they still didn't dare to speak. The two people in front of them, whether it was Demon Venerate Luoho or the Middle Heavenly Venerate, both had the strength to kill them at will. Beside Yishiwen, Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerate looked at Demon Venerate Luoho with his teeth clenched. He was the main culprit who had caused the destruction of their Talisman Dao era. Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerate could only be regarded as an accomplice. The real mastermind was none other than Demon Venerate Luoho. By relying on the destruction of their Talisman Dao era, Demon Venerate Luoho's skills and cultivation had become even more unimaginable. "I didn't expect you to come too. No, I should say that I didn't expect you to come personally. Aren't you looking for the grave of Sage Absolute Heaven? Why, haven't you found it yet?" Middle Heavenly Venerate looked at Demon Venerate Luoho and said, "How can I not come? After all, even you are here. This matter is no longer something you can protect." Demon Venerate Luoho said, "Your Eastern Heavenly Venerate is a little too arrogant. He can't escape from this calamity." "Calamity? Let's see who dares to come forward." Middle Heavenly Venerate smiled disdainfully and said, "At my level, do I still believe in such things? I believe. Why wouldn't I believe? It's because his calamity is caused by me." Demon Venerate Luoho stood with his hands behind his back and said with incomparable confidence, "I haven't fought with you for a long time. Now is the right time to see how much progress you have made. You, who have become a Middle Heavenly Venerate, should be qualified to be my opponent." Everyone understood why Demon Venerate Luoho would come here personally. It wasn't to kill Yishiwen, but to lure the Middle Heavenly Venerate away. With the Middle Heavenly Venerate overseeing this place, many people would probably be frightened. This was an expert whose name had shaken the world for countless years. He also represented the attitude of the Fortune God dynasty. Many people would have to think carefully before making a move. Middle Heavenly Venerate looked at Yishiwen. Yishiwen just waved his hand and said with a smile, "Go and teach him a lesson. As for my side, don't worry. It's just a group of clowns." "Good, huh? Martial Venerate is right. See if I don't give you a good beating." Middle Heavenly Venerate said and disappeared into the sky. Demon Venerate Luoho also just looked at Yishiwen deeply and disappeared into the sky along with Middle Heavenly Venerate. Chapter 3686. Everyone could see that Demon Venerable Luohu's arrival was to force the Middle Heavenly Master, who was a troublemaker, to leave. It was not easy to deal with Yishiwen alone. If a Middle Heavenly Master and Heaven Talisman Immortal were added into the mix, the combination would be very dangerous. Among them, the most dangerous was naturally the Middle Heavenly Master, who was more terrifying than ordinary peak Heavenly Masters. Although the remaining Heaven Talisman Immortal was also very powerful, in Demon Venerable Luohu's opinion, he could no longer affect the overall situation. This huge scheme was finally organized to kill Yishiwen. Perhaps even Demon Venerable Luohu himself did not expect that it would go so smoothly. With Yishiwen's strength, if he made up his mind to run away, perhaps no one would be able to find him. However, Yishiwen did not run away. Instead, he faced the difficulties and fought against those peak Heavenly Masters. Some people also guessed that Yishiwen must have some trump cards or even some means to counterattack. However, in the eyes of many people, that was not important. This time, it was not just one or two peak Heavenly Masters who were going to kill Yishiwen. In the face of absolute strength, all schemes and tricks were meaningless. Haha, it's really well planned and flawless. Even demon Venerable Luohu appeared. Yishuan chuckled and said, obviously, these people had prepared a huge lineup to kill him. After demon Venerable Luohu left, Heaven Talisman Immortal's anger finally calmed down a little. In that battle, their talisman Dao Era suffered a crushing defeat. The Demon Dao Era's army was led by Demon Venerable Lu, and she was the commander of the Talisman Dao Era. In that battle, they were utterly defeated and were not a match at all. Although the Talisman Dao Era's strength was originally inferior to the Demon Dao Era, it could not conceal the fact that she was defeated. In the battle between the Talisman Dao Era and the Demon Dao Era, they were utterly defeated, and she and Demon Venerable Lu also suffered a crushing defeat. She possessed the supreme ancestral symbol, while Demon Exalt Luhu wielded the heaven-splitting demonic axe. That battle could be said to be hair-raising. It was the most dangerous battle she had ever faced in her life. She was completely suppressed from the start to the end. She was suppressed by Demon Venerable Luhu and could only watch as the Talisman Dao Era was destroyed. There was nothing she could do. After that battle, she burst out the origin of the Great Path and escaped. However, the shadow of that battle never disappeared from her heart. Yishuan looked at Heaven Talisman Immortal and said, I'll let you kill him in the future. He could see that Luo Hua Demon Venerable had become a mental barrier in Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable's heart. If she could not kill Luo Hua Demon Venerable, this mental barrier would become a shadow in her heart for the rest of her life. However, there were naturally benefits when there were disadvantages. If she could get rid of the inner demon, then her cultivation would also improve by leaps and bounds. When all the celestial venerables heard Yishuan's words, they immediately felt a sense of confusion. Who did Yishuan think Demon Venerable Luo Ho was? He killed him just like that. Yes. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable nodded. If it was in the past, she would definitely not believe it. Demon Venerable Luhu was also a peak expert in many ancient eras. There were not many who could match up to him. Not to mention killing him, that was almost impossible. However, Yishuan's rapid growth gave her great confidence. It might not be possible for Yishuan now, but it was possible in the future. This was also the fundamental reason why she had chosen to come and support Yishuan. She and Yishuan had only cooperated a few times in total. Their relationship wasn't that of sharing life and death. However, she absolutely couldn't ignore the fact that Yishuan might be able to help her take revenge. This was her only hope. It was impossible for her to watch Yishuan get killed and remain indifferent. Hatred had already permeated every inch of her heart. Although she knew that this was not good, she had no other choice. Some mental barriers were not in her control. This was the only way for her to get rid of this mental barrier. Haha, what a big tone. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable. Do you really believe that he has the ability to help you take revenge? A loud and arrogant voice came from the void. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable. You are also a top powerhouse who has shocked several eras. Now that you have fallen to such a state and end up like this, I am really disappointed. Or is it that, as a woman, you only have this much tolerance? The voice of the person who came was absolutely majestic and confident. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable pursed her lips and did not say a word. She just stared at the void and said, He's here. Yishuan's expression also became solemn. The battle was really about to begin. After luring the middle Heavenly Venerable away, they would definitely attack first. After all, no one knew how long Demon Venerable Lu could hold off the middle Heavenly Venerable. Both of them were top experts, but it did not mean that Demon Venerable Luohu could hold off the middle Heavenly Venerable. That in itself was unreasonable. The world was rumbling. Countless laws began to boil. With the appearance of this person, the world was instantly boiling. You dare to come alone. Didn't Demon Venerable Scarlet Serpent and the others tell you that I have slaughtered a peak Heavenly Venerable? Yishuan's expression was cold. However, his words made all the Heavenly Venerables feel extremely terrified. It was too terrifying. A peak Heavenly Venerable. Some weak, ancient eras might not even have multiple peak heavenly venerables. However, he was slaughtered by Yi Shiwen. Such combat power was indeed tyrannical and terrifying. No wonder he dared to fight the heroes of the world here. He indeed had his own strength and pride. What? He slaughtered a peak heavenly venerable? It's too terrifying. Is this the true combat power of a martial venerable? No wonder he has such confidence. Indeed, we know about it. However, we also know that you use the supreme ancestral symbol. Do you think you can escape with your life this time? The figure did not take Yi Shiwen's words seriously. He just became colder and colder. Last time, the four of us sealed your path of no return. This time, you are dead. Yi Shiwen's performance was undoubtedly amazing. However, it was also obvious that the strength he could display was greatly limited when facing multiple peak heavenly venerables. It was not as domineering as when he was alone. Heaven Talisman Immortal, if you leave now, we can let you go. Don't get involved. That figure looked at Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable and said. His appearance was indistinct, but there was a great deterrence from him. What if I insist on getting involved? Heaven Talisman Immortal said indifferently. Then you'll be dead. The figure looked at Heaven Talisman Immortal coldly. Today we originally wanted to do something big. Killing one more peak heavenly venerable is nothing. The figure said domineeringly. I want to see if you have the ability to do so. Heaven Talisman Immortal was unmoved. She had already steeled her heart to protect Yi Shiwen. You don't have to get involved. Just support me. They're just a bunch of clowns. I can kill them. None of them can leave today. Yi Shiwen's cold gaze penetrated the layers of the void and saw the domineering figure. It was a middle-aged strong man with a face full of curly beard. He wore iron clothes and held a spear in his hand. It seemed like he could suppress everything in the world. Everything in the epic had to obey his arrangements. Powerful, terrifying, even more terrifying than the Shadow Evil Venerable that Yi Shiwen killed. Although the Shadow Evil Venerable was also powerful, his fighting style was restrained by Yi Shiwen. Therefore, it was not difficult to deal with him. The middle-aged strong man with a face full of curly beard was clearly a supreme physique cultivator. Yi Shiwen could see that the middle-aged strong man's chi and blood were surging. It was a completely different path of physique cultivation from the martial epic. It was a very strange but terrifying cultivation method. Clown? Ha! No one has ever dared to speak to me like this. The middle-aged strong man laughed heartily. His laughter was extremely cold. Friend, be careful. Heaven Talisman Immortal looked at Yi Shiwen. In the end, she did not plan to attack together with him, because she knew that this person was just a vanguard. Even if she wanted to attack, it should not be now. This person is the physique cultivator era supreme physique. He is best at fighting with his body. This is a person who has become a sage with his body. Heaven Talisman Immortal reminded. She had already recognized the identity of the person who came. Obviously, she knew the strength of this physique cultivator. Physique cultivator era? The epic where all physique cultivators started? Interesting, Yi Shiwen said. He knew that this was the physique cultivator era. It was the ancestor of all physique cultivators, including many methods of physique cultivation in the martial epic. Even the gilded tyrant form that he cultivated could be said to be from the physique cultivator era. There was only one cultivation method in this epic, and that was the physique cultivator. A powerful physique cultivator could destroy the universe with a punch and crush the universe with a kick. They were incomparably powerful. Although they did not have any magical powers, their chi and blood were unparalleled. It was difficult for any magical powers to affect them. To deal with them, one could only suppress them with their body. Among the many epics, they might not be the most powerful, but they were the most troublesome epic. This was different from the previous water era's Black Tortoise. Although that Black Tortoise's body cultivation was also very powerful, it was because it was gifted. As long as it continued to cultivate, its body would automatically become stronger and more perfect. It could not be regarded as a real physique cultivator. And the beginning of the real physique cultivator was this physique cultivator era. And this physique cultivator was obviously an outstanding figure in the physique cultivator era. His chi and blood could oppress the world. It was just a simple method, and all magical powers were not comparable to it. Chapter 3687. Heaven Talisman Immortal, you still recognize me. Then surrender. You have no chance of winning against me. Physique Immortal said indifferently. Why? Aren't you waiting for them to come? Or are you planning to take the supreme ancestral symbol for yourself? Yishuan looked at him and said with a faint smile. He seemed to have guessed Physique Immortal's plan. Take it for myself? Tizun grinned and said, of course, it can't be considered as taking everything for themselves. This is also an agreement between us. Whoever kills you will be able to obtain the supreme ancestral symbol. Since they want me to stand out, I naturally have to pay the price. Physique Immortal was not stupid. He knew a lot of things. It was just that they had a tacit understanding. I can see that your physique cultivation is very strong. You don't have to be afraid of others. Unfortunately, you met me. In terms of physique cultivation, no one can surpass our era. Physique Immortal had absolute confidence. In this aspect, he had indeed reached an unimaginable realm. He was ahead of everyone else. Since one has come first, then let's kill him first. Let's see when the others will attack. Yishuan said. He immediately said to Heaven Talisman Immortal, friend, please wait for a moment. I don't need your help with this kind of lineup. Please help me. All right, I will help you. Heaven Talisman Immortal nodded. Are you looking down on me with this kind of lineup? Physique Immortal sneered. His long hair was like a black waterfall behind his back. His whole person was like a peerless demon god with unimaginable power. Let me see how much capital you have to be arrogant. Physique Immortal sneered disdainfully. He really attacked. His 5 fingers clenched into a fist. It turned into a terrifying rainbow and went straight towards Yishuan's head. This was just a simple punch. It didn't even contain any martial arts. However, the terrifying murderous intention and the surging tide of laws had crossed the vast sky. It was as if this punch could overturn the entire era. Yishuan's expression became a bit dignified. This was indeed the most terrifying physique master he had ever encountered. He had never seen such a terrifying physique master before. The terrifying fist had yet to arrive, but the fist pressure had already made Yishuan's skin ripple. If it wasn't for the protection of the 7th metal ancestor energy, his skin would have cracked. This was a terrifying body cultivator who had already reached the peak of the 9th realm. Supreme Physique is indeed peerless. I'm afraid he's the strongest in this realm. Many heavenly venerates turned deathly pale when they saw this punch. This punch of a body venerate had left a deep impression on them. However, Yishuan wasn't an ordinary person. His legs were like the roots of an old tree, firmly fixed in the void. That boundless fist pressure rolled over, but couldn't make him move even a little bit. Roar! Yishuan let out a long roar. He also clenched his 5 fingers into a fist. It was as if he could crush the void into powder. Then, he also fiercely bombarded with a punch. Bang! In the void, the 2 fists collided fiercely. The frightening fist force devoured and repelled each other. In an instant, it turned into a frightening wave that swept in all directions. Everything within a million li was reduced to ashes. Only that barren mountain survived under the protection of Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable stood at the top of the mountain. The astral wind blew on her clothes and made a loud sound. It was as if the entire world was shaking violently. Around the entire mountain, the laws of Talisman Taoism emerged one after another, protecting the entire mountain within it. This frightening attack. When the waves dissipated, everyone saw that Supreme Physique didn't move an inch. On the contrary, Yishuan retreated 3 steps before stopping the momentum of retreating. In this attack, Yishuan fell into a disadvantageous position and was repelled. Good, Supreme Physique. In this realm, you are indeed qualified to be arrogant. Yishuan said loudly. Although he was repelled, he didn't feel the slightest bit discouraged. Instead, he laughed loudly. He only felt incomparably happy. This attack made the blood in his body surge wildly. Opposite him, although Supreme Physique had the upper hand, his expression revealed a dignified expression for the first time. Golden body of merit. You actually cultivated the golden body of merit. Supreme Physique finally couldn't keep his expression, revealing a bit of surprise. In the previous exchange, although he had the upper hand, Yi Shiwen was not injured at all. He was only repelled. The reason why he was repelled was only because Yi Shiwen's cultivation was inferior to him. However, in terms of physical strength and cultivation, Yi Shiwen was not inferior to him, so he couldn't hurt him. The physique cultivation era naturally had its unique aspects in terms of physical cultivation. Just like how the Gue water era was strong in the water attribute law, the physical cultivation methods of other eras were from the physique cultivation era. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible to reach the peak. It was not strange for experts of the martial Tao era to be able to contend with him. However, that was only possible if they cultivated strong martial arts at the same time. Pure physical cultivation could not compete with him. However, there were always exceptions. Among them, the golden body of merit was the most common way to reach the peak of physical cultivation. Cultivating the golden light of merit into the golden body of merit, one could reach the peak of this realm and not be restricted by nature. However, only very few people could achieve this. There were only 3 to 5 people in an era. In addition, many people had fallen in the reincarnation cycle after the Great Shatter. At this time, it was rare to encounter one in 10,000 people. Therefore, he was shocked. That's right. I have cultivated the golden body of merit. Although the physique cultivation was created by your physique cultivation era, the physique cultivation era isn't necessarily the only physique cultivation era that has reached the peak. Yi Shiwen laughed out loud. He had reached the peak of the physique cultivation era. You, who are not from my physique cultivation era, can actually reach this step. It is indeed extremely rare, said Supreme Physique. It's a pity that you will die here today. Supreme Physique's face revealed a somewhat regretful expression. There were too few people who could reach this step on the path of physical cultivation. Therefore, he was too lonely. Especially after the destruction of the physique cultivation era, there were even fewer people who could stand side by side with him. Don't talk big. Defeat me first, and then talk. Yi Shiwen shouted loudly. He instantly moved. This time, he took the initiative to attack. His 5 fingers clenched into a fist. Countless spiritual power was squeezed between his fingers and exploded. It scattered into a rainbow light that swept across the world. 6 paths of reincarnation. An incomparably huge 6 paths of reincarnation appeared behind Yi Shiwen. Every time the 6 paths of reincarnation rotated, the power of Yi Shiwen's fist would increase by a level. All of this took a long time to describe. However, it only took a short breath. Yi Shiwen's fist power had already increased to a shocking level. The 6 paths of reincarnation fist swept across the world. In the distance, there were many skeletons everywhere. These skeletons had experienced the destruction of the era. They hadn't been damaged by the great tribulation of the world. However, they had collapsed under Yi Shiwen's fist. They had completely turned into nothingness. Good fist technique. Supreme Physique laughed loudly. His whole body's vitality surged. Then, he took a step forward. He didn't retreat. Instead, he moved forward towards Yi Shiwen. He also bombarded his fist. Rumble. A terrible collision. The shock wave swept out. It was as if an aura of annihilation had swept out and destroyed everything. Yi Shiwen was blasted back a few steps. The gung metal ancestral chi on his body had dimmed a bit. However, he didn't retreat. Instead, he moved forward and rushed forward again. Bang! 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 In just a single breath of time, the 2 sides had already exchanged tens of thousands of moves. The collision of 2 peak body cultivators left countless spectating Empyreans dumbfounded. They all held their breath. At this time, there was no beauty in the battle between the two. The only thing that was present was brutality. There was nothing else mixed in. There was only a pure collision of hot blood. Yishuan was beaten back again and again. However, his face was full of smiles. This kind of battle was too enjoyable. It could even be said that there was nothing more enjoyable than this. It was rare for him to have such a hearty battle now. The opponents in the past could no longer pose a slight threat to him. In the eyes of everyone, although Yishuan was completely at a disadvantage and it was difficult for him to pose any fundamental threat to Supreme Physique, it was not because Yishuan was too weak. It was because Supreme Physique was too strong. There was no difference in physical cultivation between the two sides. It was purely a difference in martial power. Once Yishuan's martial power also improved, the outcome would be unpredictable. What made everyone even more shocked was that Yishuan was only in the 8th realm. Yishuan, who was in the early stage of the 8th realm, could happily fight with Supreme Physique at the peak of the 9th realm. This already proved the problem. At this time, when the battle between the two sides was white-hot, suddenly a strange laughter came. Then a terrifying rainbow came from afar. Countless scattered lights filled the entire area. Each scattered light turned into a galaxy. Countless hanging galaxies smashed down towards Yishuan. This method was really too terrifying. Whether it was speed or power, it had reached the peak. Shameless, on the barren mountain, Heaven Talisman, immortal, venerable, glared angrily. Around her, countless laws of talismans appeared and revolved around her intensely. They turned into a divine light that swept out in an attempt to intercept the intruders. But it was too late. These scattered lights turned in a galaxy and smashed into Yishuan's domain. The countless golden lights around Yishuan's body instantly transformed into a golden enchantment and protected him inside it. Rumble! These hanging galaxies fiercely collided with these golden boundaries. The violent collision annihilated everything. The surrounding space had been completely destroyed. Chapter 3688. Yishuan was submerged in the innumerable galaxies, but the entire world seemed to have disappeared in an instant. He was submerged in the boundless divine brilliance and exploded like a brilliant star. The celestial venerables opened their divine eyes one after another and saw how terrifying this attack was. It broke through many of Yishuan's defenses and directly fell on Yishuan's body. In the end, Yishuan's virtuous chi managed to block this attack. Yishuan's body slightly swayed, swaying at a strange frequency, and immediately turned the impact force into nothingness. Not only did Heavenly Talisman Immortal Venerable not expect this attack, but Yishuan was also caught off guard. Even Physique Supremacy himself was dumbfounded. He did not expect someone to attack at this time. Moreover, the range of the attack just now even enveloped him. That person did not have the slightest scruple. Physique Supremacy's expression was incomparably ugly. He said coldly, "Azure Supremacy, how dare you?" The T-Zune directly revealed the origin of the other Celestial Venerables. These Celestial Venerables were shocked. This was another peak Celestial Venerables who had been famous for countless years. Many people felt extremely terrified when they heard her name. Physique Supremacy, I see that you can't take him down. Let me help you. A woman's voice was heard. However, it was not as melodious as Heavenly Talisman Immortal Venerables. On the contrary, it was quite hoarse. Immediately after, a figure appeared. It was a woman in a palace dress. Her face was ordinary, and she looked like an ordinary middle-aged woman. However, her body exuded a terrifying aura that made many people shudder. Just a simple strike was enough to stun both Yishuan and Physique Zune. The strength of this Liuli Imperial Elder was by no means ordinary. Who said that I can't take him down? Didn't we agree earlier that I would take action? Don't tell me you want to fight with me for the supreme ancestral symbol. Physique Supremacy looked coldly at Azure Supremacy, as if he could see through Azure Supremacy's intentions. The supreme ancestral symbol naturally belongs to those who are capable. Do you really have the confidence to take him down? Or do you think we're all fools? Do you think we'll let you continue to delay until the Middle Sky Master returns? Imperial Elder Glaze didn't give any face to Supreme Elder Body. Zun Ti was indeed terrifying. He could suppress heaven and earth with just his blood chi, but Glaze Zun Ti was no weaker. He cultivated another extreme method. Body Venerable looked a bit unwilling on the surface. However, he had no other choice. He couldn't say such deceptive words. There were so many celestial masters present on the scene. None of them were fools. So, they could see that he could easily defeat Yishiwen. However, he would be deceiving himself if he said that he could easily defeat Yishiwen. He hadn't expected that a guy who was merely in the 8th realm would be so difficult to deal with. It was no wonder that Qi Lian had made such a huge concession to form this alliance to deal with Yishiwen. All right, Tizu nodded and said they would kill Yishiwen first. As for the supreme ancestral symbol, it would depend on their own means. Yishiwen looked at the two of them coldly. The two of them were almost unscrupulously discussing killing him and dividing the supreme ancestral symbol. Cut the crap. If you want to kill me, then let's see if you have the ability to do so. Yishiwen looked at the two of them coldly. He had already made a decision in his heart. What a good, revered martial artist. I can't help but admire you. You haven't been cultivating for a long time, but you're already so tyrannical. You do have the capital to be arrogant. Imperial Elder Glaze said. She didn't use much strength. However, her voice seemed to be able to shatter the spirit. Others? Not coming out? Or are you going to come out one by one? Yishiwen said. The two of us are enough to kill you. Imperial Elder Glaze didn't say much and said, the two of you are enough to kill me? I think you're too arrogant. Yishiwen looked at Imperial Elder Glaze and said, although Imperial Elder Glaze was very powerful, it was impossible to say that the two of them could absolutely kill him. Whether it's enough or not, we'll know once we try. Imperial Elder Glaze took the lead. In her hand, a longbow had appeared out of nowhere. However, the strange thing was that this longbow didn't have a bowstring. It just appeared out of thin air in Imperial Elder Glaze's hand. Take an arrow from me first. Imperial Elder Glaze suddenly grabbed at the void. A glazed bowstring appeared out of thin air. She pulled it to the extreme, like a full moon. Then, countless glazed energy appeared on the bowstring and turned into an arrow. The arrow was an extremely terrifying energy. It was majestic and boundless. It was millions of miles long. One arrow was enough to destroy a world and a galaxy. Ordinary Emperor Lords wouldn't even dare to touch the edge of it. Touching it would cause them to evaporate. Even ordinary heavenly masters wouldn't dare to take it. Imperial Elder Glaze's terrifying strength was fully displayed at this moment. The arrow formed by the torrent of energy blasted towards Yishiwen. This wasn't an arrow, but a torrent of energy. It was a torrent of energy that could destroy heaven and earth. The strength of Imperial Elder Glaze was indeed unimaginable. At this moment, Yishiwen directly moved. He didn't retreat. Facing this terrifying energy arrow that was millions of miles long, he didn't retreat at all. He took a step forward and a Gung Long saber appeared in his hand. He slashed down with the saber. Boom! The Gung Long saber slashed into the energy arrow. Countless divine rays shot out, and the world trembled violently. Two terrifying forces swept everything. In an instant, the terrifying attack shot by Lioli Yuzun was destroyed by Yishiwen's saber. It couldn't pose any threat to him. Lioli Yuzun's saber had already exploded. This should be the Gung ancestral chi of the Gung era. I didn't expect you to have such a treasure on you. Imperial Elder Glaze's eyes widened. Yishiwen could break his attack with one slash. Naturally, he wouldn't have used ordinary methods. Great, it's mine now. All talk and no action. Let's see if he can do it first. Yishiwen sneered disdainfully. He took the initiative to break out a terrifying attack. Facing the tyrannical Imperial Elder Glaze, he didn't retreat at all. He directly rushed forward. Imperial Elder Glaze kept shooting with the glazed longbow in his hand. Arrows pierced through the sky, leaving a terrifying mark in this era that couldn't be erased. Boom, boom, boom. Every time Imperial Elder Glaze launched a terrifying attack, Yi Shiwen would either smash it with his fists or slash it with the Gung Jin ancestral chi. The battle between the two sides was equally fierce. Imperial Elder Glaze shot a dense number of arrows, covering the sky and the earth. It directly filled up all the space, blocking Yi Shiwen's steps forward. Yi Shiwen's hands also turned into huge hands in the void, blocking all these arrows. He was also able to counterattack in the gaps. At this time, Imperial Elder Physique finally couldn't bear it anymore and took the initiative to attack. This time, he held a long spear in his hand. The long spear crossed the sky and grew with the wind. It grew to a length of millions of miles, and the tip of the spear pointed towards Yi Shiwen. At this moment, the martial honorable seal flew out from the top of Yi Shiwen's head and blocked the spear all of a sudden. The martial honorable seal erupted with boundless golden light of merit. Within the golden light of merit, a figure walked out. It was Yi Shiwen. However, it wasn't the main body, but an incarnation. This incarnation firmly blocked Imperial Elder Physique. You think you can stop me with just an incarnation? Imperial Elder Physique could naturally see that it was Yi Shiwen's Imperial Elder Seal's spirit incarnation. However, he didn't care about Yi Shiwen's incarnation at all. Yi Shiwen and Imperial Elder Physique weren't his opponents, let alone an incarnation. Yi Shiwen took advantage of the time when his incarnation was dragging Physique Zune. Then, he flew towards Heavenly Elder Azure Glaze. Heavenly Elder Azure Glaze was a latecomer, but his strength was still terrifying. However, Heavenly Elder Azure Glaze was easier to deal with for Yi Shiwen. When Imperial Elder Azure Glaze saw Yi Shiwen flying towards him, he wasn't scared. Instead, he was happy. This was an opportunity from the heavens. As long as he killed Yi Shiwen, then everything on Yi Shiwen's body would belong to him. Go to hell. A burst of dreadful magic power fluctuations erupted from Holy Master Azure Glaze's body. The sky was dyed in the color of colored glaze. Then, Yi Shiwen felt that he was locked by a dreadful divine will fluctuation. Even the surrounding principles began to disobey and turned into divine chains to fix him in place. Yi Shiwen was stunned. This was a battle of laws. To a large extent, the strength of a celestial master depended on how well he could control the laws. The Glaze longbow in Imperial Elder Azure Glaze's hand was also condensing a terrifying power. Countless laws were wrapped in terrifying power and integrated into the longbow, turning into an extremely powerful arrow. The target of the arrow was directly towards Yi Shiwen's forehead. It was going to shoot his head into pieces. The power contained in this arrow was too powerful. Even Imperial Elder Physique felt a great threat. He would be seriously injured if he were to take it with his bare hands. Imperial Elder Azure Glaze clearly intended to determine the outcome of this battle. He wanted to severely injure Yi Shiwen until he died. At this moment, a terrifying energy erupted from Yi Shiwen's body. It instantly broke through the shackles of the laws. The formidable power of the laws swept out. The powerful energy had already turned into a terrifying storm. Whoosh! The arrow was directly aimed at Yi Shiwen's head. Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his eyes. A terrifying light burst out from his eyes, and the arrow was directly defeated. Compared to just now, Yi Shiwen was several times stronger. In an instant, Yi Shiwen entered the state of Human One fusion. Since no one else is willing to appear first, then it's fine. I'll kill you first. After saying this, Yi Shiwen had already taken a step forward and rushed towards Imperial Elder Azure Glaze. He instantly unleashed his full power. Chapter 3689. Kill me first? Let's see what you're capable of. Azure Glaze Imperial Elder roared with a cold smile on his face. He raised his hand again, and a terrifying torrent shot out towards Yi Shiwen. Break for me, Yi Shiwen roared. This time, he simply clenched his fist and punched the torrent into nothingness. Yi Shiwen was much stronger than before after entering the state of Human Synchronized One. He could easily destroy such an attack with a single punch. Then, he directly approached Azure Glaze Imperial Elder. Faced with Yi Shiwen, who was right in front of him, Azure Glaze Uzun let out a loud roar. He didn't retreat. The longbow in his hand turned into a sword. This sword was entwined with countless laws. It transformed into a divine brilliance that filled the sky. It slashed down towards Yishiwen. It was as if the entire chaos had collapsed. It looked extremely terrifying. Come on! Yishiwen wasn't afraid in the slightest. He blasted a simple punch, and the entire primal chaos rotated along with it. Then, he welcomed this treasured sword. Bang! An incomparably loud roar was heard. The two sides finally collided. Boundless divine brilliance scattered like rain. How could this be? After the collision, Azure Glaze Imperial Elder's rather shocked voice could be heard. He could feel that his hand was slightly numb. His hand that was holding the sword was trembling and slightly numb. He even had to take a few steps back to remove this huge force. On the other hand, Yishiwen did not have the slightest intention of retreating. He merely swayed slightly and stabilized his figure. How could he be so strong? Azure Glaze Imperial Elder's eyes widened, as if he could not believe it. The overbearing and arrogant look from before had disappeared completely. Why is it impossible? Yishiwen could not help but sneer. He had just fought with Physique Zune. Even though he was not weaker than Physique Zune in terms of physical cultivation, he was still at a complete disadvantage. The fundamental reason was that he was at a complete disadvantage in terms of cultivation. He had just entered the 8th level of cultivation, while the Zune Tea was at the peak of the 9th level. The difference between them was undeniable. However, now that he had entered the state of unification of man and soul, his disadvantage in martial power had been completely compensated. He was even more terrifying than an ordinary peak celestial master. This was why the Shadow Evil Venerable wasn't his opponent at all, even though the Shadow Evil Venerable was restrained by Yishiwen. Yishiwen had just finished speaking, and his voice had barely faded when he had already pounced on Azure Glaze Uzun again. On the other side, the Body Supreme, who was still entangled with Yishiwen's revered martial seal, opened his eyes wide when he saw this scene. It seemed as if he couldn't believe it. Yishiwen's attack was too terrifying. The current battle between Yishiwen and the Azure Glaze Imperial Elder was completely different from the previous battle between him and Yishiwen. Back then, he had the upper hand, but now Yishiwen had the upper hand. Azure Glaze Imperial Elder was constantly being beaten back. Yishiwen's offensive was like a storm. He didn't give the Azure Glaze Imperial Elder the slightest chance to breathe. It could be said that Yishiwen was incomparably experienced. It was impossible to achieve this if one wasn't a veteran. He even had some doubts. If it was him, would he really have the upper hand like before? I'm afraid he wouldn't be able to do it. Thinking of this, even he was a little shaken. However, there was no way for him to support Azure Glaze Imperial Elder at this time. The spirit of the revered martial seal in front of him was entangled with him. Although the spirit of the revered martial seal was not his opponent, even with the golden light of merit, it was enough to entangle him. At this time, he seemed to understand Yishiwen's plan. It was better to break one finger than to injure 10 fingers. Not only Yishiwen understood this principle, but he also understood it. However, he didn't understand where Yishiwen got such confidence to kill Azure Glaze Imperial Elder in such a short time. Even if he really killed him, what impact would it have on the overall battle? It was obvious that the two of them weren't the only ones who came this time. The others just hadn't attacked yet. Compared to the horror of the physical supreme outside, Azure Glaze Imperial Elder didn't have time to think about this. For him, there was nothing more important than blocking Yishiwen's attack in front of him. Judging from the situation in front of him, it was already very difficult to block Yishiwen's attack. Yishiwen continued to attack. Each attack was as heavy as a mountain. It seemed as if it could shatter the world. She was also a veteran of hundreds of battles, but she had never encountered such a violent opponent. Her spiritual power continuously flowed from her body to her arms to alleviate the injuries on her arms. It was as if she had suffered a terrifying attack from a heavy object. Her muscles were torn, and some were even directly annihilated at the cellular level. She was already very skilled to be able to persist until now. If it was someone else, one move would be enough to seriously injure him. Another move would be enough to kill him. Damn it, how can he be so strong? He is already so strong now. If he continues to grow, the consequences will be unpredictable. Azure Glaze Imperial Elder retreated as he fought. He tried his best not to confront Yi Shiwen head-on. Usually, when she encountered such an invincible opponent, she would try her best to respond with exquisite moves to reduce the impact. What made her even more depressed was that Yi Shiwen was obviously above her in this aspect. Yi Shiwen knew too many martial arts, especially the 3,000 martial arts that he had cultivated. It had reached a horrifying level. Throughout this series of crazy exchanges, Yi Shiwen didn't use any of the same attacks. All of them were new moves that Azure Glaze Imperial Elder hadn't encountered before. It was enough to show that Yi Shiwen had climbed to the peak in this aspect. Therefore, she could only take the attacks passively. At this time, she already understood that when Yi Shiwen said that he had killed a powerful celestial master, he was definitely not joking. He was probably telling the truth. Hold on. As long as you can't hold on anymore, I will definitely tear you into pieces. Azure Glaze Imperial Elder said, while gritting her teeth. Her magic eyes could also see that Yi Shiwen's body was surging with infinite spiritual power. His body was also being torn apart by a terrifying force. As long as she could hold on, it would be Yi Shiwen's death. Can't hold on anymore? I'm afraid you won't have this chance. Yi Shiwen shouted. The gung metal ancestral chi in his hand turned into a long spear and directly pointed at Azure Glaze Imperial Elder. The long spear was like lightning, and it instantly arrived in front of Azure Glaze Imperial Elder. Azure Glaze Imperial Elder tried her best to resist, but the long spear still pierced through all her defensive boundaries. The gung metal ancestral chi was unparalleled in attack. Bang! The long spear directly pointed in front of Azure Glaze Imperial Elder. A jade color appeared in front of Azure Glaze Imperial Elder, blocking Yi Shiwen's spear in a thrilling way. But at the same time, she also let out a scream. Then, her whole body was sent flying, and she spat out a mouthful of blood essence. Although the spear just now did not pierce through her, it still injured her. This was the first time Lioli Yuzun had been injured while fighting against Yi Shiwen. This was the so-called quantitative change that led to qualitative change. After suffering from Yi Shiwen's series of terrifying attacks, she couldn't hold on any longer. This is impossible. Azure Glaze Imperial Elder was actually injured by a revered martial artist. Many onlooking heavenly venerables widened their eyes, looking at the scene in front of them as if they had seen a ghost. What kind of joke was this? In terms of strength, in terms of realm, Azure Glaze Imperial Elder was stronger. Not only was she defeated by Yi Shiwen, but she was also beaten to the point of spitting out blood. This revered martial artist must have entered the state of Human One with the supreme ancestral symbol. But I didn't expect this state of Human One to be so strong. It's simply too terrifying. Now I understand why revered martial artists dared to challenge the heroes of the world here. Emperor, trampling the world. Yi Shiwen shouted. His body turned into the law of heaven and earth. Then he suddenly stomped his foot down. This stomp was like the sky was collapsing, and even the sky curtain was descending. Azure Glaze Imperial Elder couldn't dodge at all. Her eyes widened, and she roared, "You've gone too far." After she roared, an incomparably huge figure also emerged from her body. It was a figure shadow, and it went up to Yi Shiwen's foot. Bang! This foot instantly trampled the incomparably powerful figure into pieces, but it still couldn't stop Yi Shiwen. However, it delayed Yi Shiwen's time, giving Azure Glaze Imperial Elder time to escape. Even if it was only for a moment, it was still very precious to her. Puff! Azure Glaze Imperial Elder's entire body accelerated and flew backward. She wasn't trampled, but she was swept a little. She couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood. Yi Shiwen's foot was too heavy as Mount Tai. You think you can escape? Yi Shiwen sneered, and his expression became even colder. He directly chased after her, and the Gungjin ancestral chi in his hand turned into a sword. Die! This sword directly chopped down, and it was about to kill Azure Glaze Imperial Elder. Damn it, get out of my way! Physical Emperor roared, but he still couldn't get rid of the entanglement of revered martial artist Seal. Although the revered martial artist Seal's figure was already very transparent, and it was constantly being beaten back, it still couldn't be dealt with in a short time. He could only watch helplessly as Heavenly Elder Azure Glaze was about to die in Yishuan's hands. Heavenly Elder Azure Glaze had made a mistake in one move, but it had brought about a fatal disaster. This was a fight between top-notch experts. Stop! A loud shout came from afar. Finally, someone couldn't help but make a move. A terrifying power crushed down. Heavenly Talisman Immortal, stop him! Yishuan only opened his mouth and said without turning his head. At this time, the value of a teammate was reflected. However, there was no need for him to say it. Heavenly Talisman Immortal, who was previously fooled by Azure Glaze Imperial Elder, was already prepared to make a move. He was fooled once because he wasn't prepared, but he couldn't tolerate being fooled a second time. Boom! Heavenly Talisman Immortal's countless Talisman Dao laws interweaved into a large net, blocking this attack. On the other side, Yishuan also slashed Azure Glaze Imperial Elder in half. Chapter 3690. Pucci, Heavenly Elder Azure Glaze was slashed into two halves by Yishuan's sword. Her physical body was split open, and her spirit was struggling inside. However, after struggling for a long time, it could only be burned to ashes by the gung metal ancestral chi. The heavenly masters who were forced to this point were actually very fragile. In the eyes of ordinary people, they were invincible, and no one could hurt them. However, in reality, they were equally fragile. There was no difference at all. As long as one had the ability to kill them, the final result was actually the same. Obviously, the gung metal ancestral chi had such an ability to kill Heavenly Elder Azure Glaze. All of this took a long time to describe, but it actually happened in just a moment. One mistake caused Heavenly Elder Azure Glaze to be killed by Yishuan. This also made many onlooking heavenly masters widen their eyes. They were completely dumbfounded. He actually succeeded. They might have seen from the battle just now that Heavenly Elder Azure Glaze, who was at a complete disadvantage, might be defeated. However, they never thought that Heavenly Elder Azure Glaze would be defeated so quickly. It was a crushing defeat, and this crushing defeat even cost him his life. This was also in line with Yishuan's previous ominous fate. This guy simply didn't know what it meant to be lenient. He also didn't know what it meant to have scruples. No matter who provoked him, there was only one end for them, and that was to die tragically. A peak Empyrean was not an ordinary character. They were likely the rulers of an epic. The fall of a peak Empyrean could represent the complete decline of a weak epic. After all, not all epics were as powerful as the Demon Path epic. Heavenly Elder Azure Glaze is dead. A peak Heavenly Master. The fall of any peak Heavenly Master is a major event even in an era. Now, he actually died here. Especially those who originally had the idea of taking advantage of the situation, they only felt a chill on their backs. Now that they thought about it carefully, it was a little terrifying. Yishuan had killed Heavenly Lord Glaze in a very short time. He had done it at lightning speed. If they were in his place, perhaps they wouldn't have been able to withstand a few moves before dying tragically. Thinking of this, many people immediately dispelled the idea of taking advantage of the situation. It was good to be the fisherman who benefited from the fight between the sandpiper and the clam, but it also depended on whether they had the ability to do so. The Glaze Imperial Elder is really dead. Tizun, who had just defeated the artifact spirit of the martial sovereign seal, was dumbfounded by the scene before him. Although he wasn't the one who died, at his level, he could be considered a supreme expert in the world. Basically, as long as he didn't court death, he wouldn't die. Moreover, the two of them had joined forces to besiege Yishuan. Now, Lili Yuzuan had died just like that. This inevitably made him feel a little sad. At the same time, he truly felt the threat of Yishuan. At this moment, Yishuan truly possessed the strength to kill him. This sudden sense of crisis caused him to immediately be on guard. Wu Zun, do you know the consequences of killing him? Tizun opened his mouth and asked. The killing intent in his eyes intensified. What other consequences can there be? I have even killed the shadow evil master, let alone glazed imperial elder. If you want to trouble me, let's see if your life is that tough. Yi Shiwen sneered and said. At this time, most of the heavenly masters knew that Yi Shiwen had killed a peak heavenly master. If they had known this news earlier, they probably wouldn't have dared to have any other thoughts. This was obviously beyond the level where they could take advantage of the situation. This was a real battle between peak heavenly masters. Good, Wu Zun. You really have guts. However, the more you are like this, the more you have to die this time. Tizun's heart was filled with killing intent at this time. Not for anything else, but to avoid future troubles. He had to kill Yi Shiwen. He was already so strong at this time. What would he become in the future? It would be very difficult to fight against him at that time. If it's possible, let's give it a try. Yi Shiwen grabbed the corpse of the glazed imperial elder and exploded it. It turned into the purest blood essence and poured it into the world tree. The world tree's fruit on the world tree had absorbed so much essence blood that it had finally matured. Yi Shiwen watered the world tree with the blood essence of a peak expert again and again. The world tree was also growing at an astonishing speed. Therefore, the world tree fruit that it produced was getting harder and harder to mature. However, once it matured, its effect was far beyond imagination. He looked at Heaven Talisman Immortal. In front of Heaven Talisman Immortal, a figure was blocked by her. Who else could it be but the Moon City Lord? The Moon City Lord just wanted to save the glazed Imperial Elder, but he was blocked by Heaven Talisman Immortal. At this time, his face was extremely ugly. In the end, he still intervened. However, even if he intervened, he still couldn't save the glazed Imperial Elder. This was simply a great shame. Similarly, the sense of crisis in his heart suddenly exploded. Compared to the last time they fought, Yi Shiwen was more than a few times stronger. He killed the glazed Imperial Elder in a short time. He had truly reached the point where he could threaten experts of their level. He was extremely emotional. He didn't expect Yi Shiwen's growth to be so fast. When he first heard of Yi Shiwen, he was nothing. He was just a junior who entered the Heavenly Lord realm by luck. At that time, it was just a simple matter for him to kill Yi Shiwen. However, it had evolved to the point where he had gathered a large number of experts, but he was not completely confident that he could kill Yi Shiwen. The reason why he had to save the glazed Imperial Elder was not because of their good relationship. It was purely because it was not easy to deal with experts of this level. One more person meant one more hope of killing Yi Shiwen. One less person meant one less hope. He had no choice but to act and save them. Among these people, his killing intent towards Yi Shiwen was the heaviest. Therefore, others could ignore many things, but he couldn't. Yi Shiwen could feel that the glazed Imperial Elder and the Moon City Lord had surrounded him from the left and right. Obviously, they were preventing him from escaping. However, they didn't intend to take the initiative to attack. Everyone was clear that Yi Shiwen relied on the supreme ancestral symbol to have such amazing combat power. The safest way was to wait for his own death. Why? Are there still people who aren't willing to come out? Aren't you afraid that I will kill you one by one? Yi Shiwen sneered. As soon as he finished speaking, the Red Serpent Demon Elder had already appeared. After a while, the Destructive Stone Elder had also revealed himself. What a big move! Yi Shiwen looked in the direction of the city Lord of the Moon City. It was really a big move. In this short period of time, the Shadow Evil Senior who had been killed by Yi Shiwen and the Demon Venerable Luo Ho who had been pinned down by the Middle Heavenly Venerable who hadn't made a move yet. There were a total of 7 paragons, peak experts that were normally hard to come by. Now, all of them had actually appeared, and their purpose was merely to surround and kill him. Such a lineup was enough to besiege and kill a Supreme Master like the Middle Heavenly Master, let alone besiege and kill him. Even if they were to launch another attack on the Moon City, such a lineup would be enough. They shouldn't be underestimated. He didn't know how much the Moon City Lord had paid to invite these people, but he could feel the boundless hatred the Moon City Lord had for him. However, it was normal when he thought about it. Yi Shiwen had killed the Moon City Lord's beloved son, killed his most loyal subordinate, and even lost the position of the Moon City Lord that he had held for countless years because of him. It could be said that he had lost everything overnight. He had been deserted by everyone, and Yi Shiwen, who had caused all of this, was naturally a thorn in his side. If it wasn't for Yi Shiwen, things wouldn't have developed to this point. It could be said that all of this was caused by Yi Shiwen. Of course, the cause was still the Moon City Lord himself. It was just that he didn't care about Yi Shiwen at that time. He, the dignified Moon City Lord, proposed marriage to Yi Shiwen because he thought highly of Yi Shiwen and his master. But in the end, this person that he had never thought highly of finally caused the collapse of the force that he had built for countless years, even though the main force was actually the Middle Heavenly Master. After hearing Yi Shiwen's words, the Heavenly Masters thought about it and realized that it was true. This was really terrifying. There were 7 peak Supreme Masters, and there was even a terrifying figure like Demon Venerable Luo Ho among them. Such a lineup was used to besiege Yi Shiwen. It was really unprecedented. Just how much did the City Lord of Moon City hate this martial saint to be forced to such an extent? "It's worth it as long as I can kill you," said the Moon City Lord. "There's no way you can escape this time. Although you seem to have killed Heavenly Venerable Azure Glaze at lightning speed and seem powerful, it actually exposed your weakness of not being able to fight for long periods of time. If you weren't guilty, why would you do this?" After the shock that Yi Shiwen gave them, they quickly reacted and immediately understood that Yi Shiwen's situation was far from optimistic. It could even be said that it was extremely bad. They still had this bit of confidence. "You guys are really too confident." Yi Shiwen withdrew from the state of man-unification as one. Then, a phoenix cry resounded from within his body. It was the magical power of phoenix regeneration technique, and the numerous wounds on his body began to heal. "I'm indeed not able to fight for long periods of time. But have you ever thought about why I would jump into this trap when I knew it was a trap?" said Yi Shiwen coldly. "I don't care why you did it. It doesn't matter once I kill you," said the Moon City Lord, his eyes getting colder. As he spoke, he directly moved and attacked Yi Shiwen, taking advantage of the fact that Yi Shiwen was not in the state of human unification. Chapter 3691. The Moon City Lord was also a veteran of many battles. He knew that Yi Shiwen had withdrawn from the state of human consonance to recuperate and prepare to recover. He would not give Yi Shiwen a chance at all. One after another, incomparably huge moon steels came crashing down from the sky. Countless rays of moonlight descended, releasing the incomparably terrifying will and killing intent of the City Lord of Moon City, traversing the heavens. Every moon steel grew invisibly and released an immortal aura. It was as if they were as huge as the entire galaxy. The Moon City Lord used an extremely powerful attack. He knew that he had to be careful when facing Yi Shiwen. If he was not careful, he would lose his life. Countless moon steels fell towards Yi Shiwen like raindrops. Yi Shiwen's feet were like 2 iron pillars inserted into the void. Then he clenched his fist and punched out. Boom, boom, boom. Yi Shiwen's fist shadows swept across the sky, forming a sky curtain. The moon steels that were falling like raindrops were blasted into powder. It was just like when Yi Shiwen first fought with the Moon City Lord. However, compared to that time, the Moon City Lord had not made much progress, but Yi Shiwen was much stronger than before. Clang! Countless blazing divine lights swept across. Many heavenly venerables who were watching the fight were extremely shocked. Yi Shiwen was not in the state of human consonance, but he was still terrifyingly powerful, although he was not as strong as when he was in the state of human consonance. In terms of combat power, he had firmly entered the ranks of the 9th realm. Even so, the Moon City Lord crushed Yi Shiwen with absolute strength. He steadily suppressed Yi Shiwen. The series of attacks were airtight, not giving Yi Shiwen the slightest chance to breathe. In the face of the Moon City Lord's tide-like attacks, Yishiwen could only use his fist shadows to resist. He was like a small boat that could be overturned at any time in a storm. However, no matter how the Moon City Lord attacked, it was difficult to break through Yishiwen's defense. In this aspect, Yishiwen could be said to have reached the peak. Countless people were terrified. "I'm coming too." The destructive stone venerable had been watching for a long time and finally joined the battle. Although the Moon City Lord had the upper hand, he still decided to intervene. If things continued like this, the Moon City Lord would need a long time to defeat or even kill Yishiwen even if he had the upper hand. The destructive stone venerable had had enough. Unlike the storm-like, terrifying offensive of the City Lord of the Moon City, the destructive stone elder used an incomparably violent fighting style. Countless stone energies condensed on his fist, and his fist pierced through the vast sky. He was about to beat Yishiwen to death. There were no complicated moves, nor were there any dazzling attacks. It was just a punch, but it had a terrifying power that could destroy heaven and earth. The addition of the destructive stone saint quickly plunged Yishiwen, who was originally at ease, into an absolute crisis. The destructive stone saint's offensive was like a tide, rampaging around. Each attack was the simplest. However, such a simple attack possessed great power. It wasn't something that an ordinary person could deal with. After cooperating with the Moon City Lord, Yishiwen was forced to retreat step by step. He was no longer as calm as before. "Not enough, not enough. I need more time." Yishiwen let out a long roar. All the spiritual power in his body was ignited, and he was raised to the extreme. He collided with the two directly. He was buying time. It was none other than the time when the world tree fruit ripened. After he killed Azure Supreme and killed so many heavenly masters, the world tree fruit was finally about to ripen. The most important thing for Yishiwen now was time. Given enough time, he would make history and create everything. What are you two waiting for? Why don't you take advantage of this time to take him down? At this time, the Moon City Lord said loudly. He hated Yishiwen to the extreme. "I'll kill him. Scarlet Serpent, Demon Venerable. Watch Heaven Talisman, Immortal Venerable," said the Physique Supreme. From the previous attack, he was full of fear towards Heaven Talisman, Immortal Venerable. If Heaven Talisman, Immortal Venerable hadn't interfered, Azure Supreme wouldn't have died. After all, Heaven Talisman, Immortal Venerable was also an expert of this level. If she insisted on taking action, she could still interfere with the battle. 3 against 1 and 4 against 2 were not the same concept. No problem. Scarlet Serpent, Demon Venerable didn't take action. She just crossed her arms and looked coldly at Heaven Talisman, Immortal Venerable. "Heaven Talisman, Immortal Venerable, I advise you to take this opportunity to escape. Otherwise, once we kill Wu Zun, the next to die will be you." Heaven Talisman, Immortal Venerable gritted her teeth and said coldly, "In your dreams." She was about to rush into the battle to save Yishiwen, but she received Yishiwen's voice transmission. "You don't have to take action. Just help me." Yishiwen's words made her stop. She didn't know what Yishiwen was planning, but since Yishiwen still said so, she could only not intervene. However, she still stared at Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable. At this time, the only thing she could do was to stare at Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable to prevent her from joining the battle. Yishiwen, who was already retreating under the attacks of the Moon City Lord and Destructive Stone Venerable, instantly deteriorated the situation after Physique Venerable joined the battle. The magical powers of the Moon City Lord were invincible. Moreover, the physical cultivation of Venerable Physique and Venerable Destructive Stone had reached the pinnacle. They weren't inferior to Yishiwen in the slightest. Their martial power was superior to Yishiwen's. Even the virtuous tyrant Physique couldn't withstand such crazy attacks after a series of attacks. Yishiwen was beaten until he bled all over. The dense cracks on his body also showed what kind of terrible battle Yishiwen was facing at this time. Even with his tyrant gilded body, he was already seriously injured. The heavenly venerables were terrified when they saw this scene. It was as if they had seen a ghost. Under the attacks of 3 peak heavenly venerables, Yi Shiwen still didn't fall. Many people found it unbelievable that he could persist until now. Bang! Venerable Physique's fist broke through Yi Shiwen's defense and bombarded on his chest. Yi Shiwen finally let out a muffled groan, and his entire body was sent flying upside down. His body bang suddenly split into pieces while he was flying. His body had been smashed to pieces by the attack. It could be said that this was the most tragic battle he had encountered in these years. Where he fought against the Chaos Overlord and the Moon City Lord previously. Although it was also very tragic, it was mostly due to the injuries caused by the supreme ancestral symbol. Few enemies could cause such injuries to him. But now, how long had it been? Yi Shiwen's body had already been beaten to pieces. Opposite him, the destructive stone Venerable and the other two were extremely shocked. Yi Shiwen was only in the 8th realm, but he could actually persist until now. This was the first time his body had been beaten to pieces by the three of them. This kind of terrible strength was absolutely unique in the 8th realm. He could even compete with the 9th realm. With his age and strength, this was an extremely dangerous sign. This made the three of them even more determined to kill Yi Shiwen. Such a person must not be allowed to survive. Soon, Yi Shiwen's body reassembled in midair. However, at this time, Yi Shiwen's face was obviously a bit pale. This time, his body had been beaten to pieces. Although he had recovered, it was still a serious injury. However, the Moon City Lord and the other two rushed at him again, not giving him a chance to breathe. However, Yi Shiwen pinched a technique and instantly escaped millions of miles away. This made the three of them slightly stunned. They didn't expect that Yi Shiwen would retreat like this. Even when the battle was the most intense, and Yi Shiwen was suppressed and beaten to the most miserable state, he didn't retreat. It seemed as if he wanted to fight to the death with the three of them. This was in line with their wishes. Yi Shiwen fighting to the death with them was the most advantageous for them. It would be best if they could beat Yi Shiwen to death. He wants to escape. This was the first thought in the minds of the three of them. However, Yi Shiwen did not retreat further. He only withdrew from the attack range of the three of them. He was constantly panting. Obviously, he wanted to buy some time to recover from his injuries. It's useless. You are dead today. At this time, the Supreme Physique said loudly. His eyes were full of killing intent. At this point, he had already shed all pretense of cordiality. It was already a fight to the death. Not being able to kill me just now will be your biggest mistake. Yi Shiwen calmed his breathing and said. There was a smile on his face. It was as if the person who had been beaten to pieces was not him, but someone else. At this moment, his battle intent seemed to have soared to an extreme. Exhilarating. This was simply too exhilarating. Although he was suppressed in this series of battles and was beaten miserably, to him, it was still exhilarating. The warlike and hot-blooded genes in his bones had been awakened. He reached into his inner world and took out a world fruit from the world tree in his inner world. Stop him! The Moon City Lord opened his eyes wide and quickly shouted. He only thought that this was a holy item that Yi Shiwen used to heal his injuries. He subconsciously reacted and could not let Yi Shiwen continue. The Supreme Physique rushed out without waiting for the city Lord to finish his words. He instantly arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. He had crossed millions of miles in one step. However, it was too late. Yi Shiwen was already prepared. He opened his mouth and swallowed the world fruit. Boom! An incomparably terrifying energy burst out of Yi Shiwen's body. It was a bit similar to the time when he had entered the human synchronized state. However, it was different. Bang! The Supreme Physique's spear crossed the vast sky and arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. However, Yi Shiwen raised his hand and blocked it at the last moment. Finally, it's time for me to fight back. Yi Shiwen grinned. His smile contained a bone-deep killing intent. Chapter 3692. He could already feel the energy pouring into his body from the fruit of the world tree. It turned into a steady stream of surging martial power that filled every cell. What? Senior Physique realized that his spear had been easily blocked by Yi Shiwen, so he couldn't kill him. However, he still coldly said, It doesn't matter how many times you recover. I can kill you. I don't believe that you have many of those holy, healing treasures." At this time, the destructive stone Zune and the Moon City Lord had also flown over. They surrounded Yi Shiwen and didn't let him escape. "Ha, do I need to escape?" Yi Shiwen laughed. "From the beginning to the end, you never thought about why I stayed and fought with you. But it doesn't matter. It's my turn to fight back now." Ridiculous. The destructive stone Zune was the most direct. Countless stone chi swept over and danced in the sky. It turned into a terrifying torrent. It was huge like a galaxy and swept towards Yi Shiwen. Bang! Yi Shiwen stood in the air and didn't move. He smashed the torrent into pieces on the spot with a punch. His imposing aura was also rising and had returned to its peak. This wasn't a big deal at first, but they soon discovered an amazing thing, and that was he didn't stop after returning to his peak. Instead, he went one step further and had a breakthrough. His martial power was obviously stronger than before. He actually made a breakthrough. Demon Venerable Scarlet Serpent was a bystander. He could see everything clearly. He could clearly see that Yi Shiwen's strength had increased by a notch. He can still make a breakthrough in this kind of battle. It wasn't that they hadn't seen breakthroughs in such intense battles before. In fact, they had done such miraculous things many times themselves. However, the Heavenly Venerate realm was different. Any progress in this realm required countless years to pave the way. It was almost impossible to break through in the midst of a battle. At this time, he seemed to understand why Yi Shiwen could reach this realm in such a short time. It's useless even if he made a breakthrough. He will still die. The spear in his hand was like a huge dragon. It swept across the vast sky and formed a great suppression on Yi Shiwen. More than half of the era was trembling violently. This spear swept across with a terrifying power, as if the end of the world was coming. Yi Shiwen's spear was the first to react. However, Yi Shiwen's reaction was beyond his expectations. This time, he did not choose to defend. Instead, he stretched out his arms, and his fists turned into the 6 paths of reincarnation fist, forming 2 torrents that went against the spear. Yi Shiwen responded to the spear's attack with an attack instead of choosing to defend. Bang! Unexpectedly, Yi Shiwen hadn't been defeated even though he had chosen to confront the Body Supreme head-on. On the contrary, he had blocked this terrifying attack. Yi Shiwen's figure slightly swayed, which was completely different from the situation of him being suppressed and falling into a disadvantageous position a moment ago. At this time, Yi Shiwen seemed to have entered a kind of transformation, as if he had been reborn. The venerable body finally reacted at this time. He knew that the feeling he had felt a moment ago wasn't an illusion. It was real. Yi Shiwen had blocked his attack and hadn't been able to break it. It was definitely not an illusion that Yi Shiwen was able to block his attack. Yi Shiwen stretched out his arms. He could feel that his strength was gradually increasing. He could even sense a large amount of this growth speed in a short time. This feeling was really cool. He didn't take the risk of being killed in vain when he chose to stay. Take one of my attacks, too. Suddenly, the revered martial seal flew out of Yi Shiwen's hand. Then, countless principles of martial arts flew out of the revered martial seal and formed a rainbow-colored waterfall in the sky. Then Yi Shiwen grabbed it in his hand and smashed it towards Body Venerable. Bang! A terrifying attack erupted in an instant. The entire heaven and earth of the era seemed to have been flipped over as countless martial Tao laws gathered together, forming an incomparably powerful current. The venerable body snorted coldly. He didn't take Yi Shiwen's attack seriously. He also swept his spear across the galaxy. Clang! An incomparably loud roar rang out, accompanied by a burst of metallic vibrations that transformed into a raging tide of energy. The Supreme Physique actually felt a frightening, rebounding force pass through the long spear and sweep towards his arm. His arm was slightly trembling. He had been shaken by Yi Shiwen. How is this possible? Your martial power has increased so much. He could feel that Yi Shiwen's martial power had increased a lot. He had already reached the peak of physical cultivation. However, he wasn't necessarily stronger than Yi Shiwen. The only difference between them was their martial power. Now that Yishiwen's martial power had increased, the gap between them had naturally been closed. The destructive stone venerable had already rushed in front of Yishiwen at this time. His body was also brimming with a powerful fighting intention. His fists were like terrifying Taoist tools that could destroy the world. He was extremely conceited as he rushed towards Yishiwen. The destructive stone venerable's fists were invincible. However, his speed was very fast. In fact, Yishiwen shouldn't have been able to react. The reason why it was because the destructive stone venerable's judgment was based on his previous experience of fighting with Yishiwen. In fact, he had cooperated with the venerable body many times in the previous battle. Yishiwen had been repeatedly defeated and vomited blood. However, he had miscalculated this time. Yishiwen's reaction had exceeded his imagination. Even the seven-colored light of the law of time had emerged on Yishiwen's body. Yishiwen raised his hand and opened his palm. Bang! A terrifying attack was heard. Yishiwen raised his hand to block the two punches that could penetrate the world. You can take these 2 punches of mine. The destructive stone venerable looked at Yishiwen in shock. The power of these 2 punches was no less than the full power of a heavenly master Taoist tool. It wasn't enough to kill Yishiwen. However, it was enough to make him vomit blood. However, Yishiwen just shook his body slightly and completely blocked the destructive stone venerable body's attack. It was obviously stronger than when he had attacked the venerable body previously. The Moon City Lord, who hadn't made a move yet, also opened his eyes wide. He couldn't believe it. Yishiwen's strength had improved again and again in such a short time. It was too shocking. Idiot, do you think that the situation is still the same as before? Yishiwen laughed loudly. He only felt that his anger had finally been vented. He had been suppressed and beaten just now. Although he had gritted his teeth and persevered, waiting for the world tree fruit to mature, he still felt unsatisfied in his heart. Now, his anger had finally been vented. The venerable body, destructive stone venerable, and the Moon City Lord glanced at each other. They understood the fear in each other's eyes. Yishiwen's continuous breakthroughs had also put great pressure on the 3 of them. The 3 of them finally decided to go all out. They couldn't let him continue to grow like this. Boom! All of a sudden, a huge city appeared behind the Moon City Lord. This city was none other than the Moon City. He had been a Moon City Lord for so many years. He had already completely integrated his will into the city. At this time, the Moon City had manifested. It was his world, and he could suppress all strong enemies. Behind the destructive stone venerable, a huge stone age had manifested. It was a huge world. This world had evolved from the great Tao laws. It was also the embodiment of all his will. The physical cultivation era had also manifested around the physical cultivation era. In this era, countless creatures were frantically tempering their physical bodies, using all kinds of methods to train. The physical body was the foundation of all cultivation. Powerful will evolve in the void one after another, enhancing the strength of the physical cultivation era. Yishiwen looked at the 3 of them. His eyes were overflowing with fighting spirit. He could see that the 3 of them were already doing their best. At the same time, it also proved that their patience had reached its limit. This was a battle of life and death. It was either you die or I die. There was no third option. The 3 great inner worlds gathered and surrounded Yishiwen. Although they were only inner worlds, they were no different from real worlds. In these worlds, they were the only masters. No one could compete with them. Martial Venerable, you won't be able to escape today. The Moon City Lord shouted loudly. Around him, moon steels appeared, forming a heavenly cycle great array. It had the power to swallow the sky. Are you trying to scare me? I'm scared, Yishiwen said. His voice was sonorous and powerful. It was neither servile nor overbearing. At the same time, the martial venerable seal flew out from above his head. It rotated and hung down layers of light curtains. It was a defense. In the light curtains, Yishiwen's strength was still increasing. The huge energy of the world fruit was being refined by him little by little, pushing his skills to the peak of the 8th realm bit by bit. Therefore, he was not in a hurry. He was not in a hurry to attack first. The longer he delayed, the stronger his strength would become. His chances of killing them would also be greater. However, it was obvious that the physical venerable could not wait for Yi Shiwen to reach that level. The immortal rune appeared on the spear of the physical venerable. It directly crossed the galaxy and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. He was incomparably domineering. He dared to fight against the world with his iron clothes and spear. This was a real battle between the peak of the supreme level. The three of them were forced to take out their last trump cards to fight against Yi Shiwen. Demon Venerable Scarlet Serpent was already stunned. It was not because of the strength of the four people on the battlefield, but because the three of them had been forced to this point. Is it really so terrifying? Chapter 3693. He was very clear about the strength of the three. Because of this, he was very shocked. With the strength of the three, they were actually forced to this extent by Yi Shiwen. They had to join forces and use their full strength. If they didn't join forces, the consequences would be unimaginable. They might be killed by Yi Shiwen. Since when could Yi Shiwen pose such a big threat to them? At this time, he began to regret. If he could arrive a step earlier, he might be able to kill Yi Shiwen earlier, and it wouldn't have developed to this extent now. He was confident that he could solve everything previously, but now it turned out that he was thinking too much. It was simply impossible. The spectating heavenly venerables felt a little numb now. The situation on the battlefield had changed again and again. In the beginning, Yi Shiwen had been suppressed by Physique Zune. Later, Yi Shiwen had been besieged by Physique Zune and Heavenly Venerable Azure Glaze. He had actually fought back and even killed Heavenly Venerable Azure Glaze. Then, in the face of the joint attack of the three masters, Yi Shiwen was once at a disadvantage. Now, he launched a desperate counterattack. This series of ups and downs was just like an 8 o'clock TV series. It made them a little numb as they watched. It seemed that no matter what Yi Shiwen did, it was a very normal thing. There was nothing strange about it. On the other hand, Heaven Talisman Immortal on the side looked at Yi Shiwen's heroic appearance. She couldn't help but be amazed. She knew that if she wanted to take revenge, all her hopes might be pinned on Yi Shiwen. Although in this world, the destruction of an era and the birth of an era were eternal and unchanging, she knew that if this inner demon couldn't be eliminated, it might drag her into a boundless abyss. Facing the siege of the three, Yi Shiwen had the Martial Master seal above his head. He just said loudly, "Do you think the three of you can kill me?" He stretched his arms and directly evolved the Six Paths roulette to plunge the world into reincarnation. In particular, the true meaning of reincarnation contained in it made the world tremble. The current Nirvana era was actually in line with the true meaning of reincarnation. Therefore, it could trigger the resonance of the world, using the power of heaven and earth to toughen the inner world of the three. Yi Shiwen didn't use his inner world. He didn't want to expose the world tree because he didn't know what kind of terrifying frenzy it would cause if it was exposed. He didn't know how many experts would plot against him. A genuine world tree was even more precious than a supreme ancestral symbol. Although the world tree in Yi Shiwen's hand was not yet mature, its value was no less than that of a supreme ancestral symbol. Otherwise, it would not have allowed his cultivation to continuously improve. However, even so, it was enough for him to contend against three great experts without falling into a disadvantageous position. "You're dead this time." The City Lord of Moon City opened his arms, and the terrifyingly powerful Moon City came crashing down. Even an entire world couldn't withstand his sweep and suppression. Boom! Moon City crashed down. This wasn't just a manifestation of the great Tao and nomological laws of Moon City. On the contrary, it had borrowed the power of Moon City from the boundless chaos verse. Moon City's foundation had been built by the founder of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. One could imagine how much power was hidden within. Bang! Moon City crashed onto Yi Shiwen's body. It was as if he had been smashed by a world. However, Yi Shiwen didn't move at all. He allowed Moon City to fall onto his body. However, in the next moment, Yi Shiwen's aura changed. He was still growing stronger. "I'll start with you," Yi Shiwen said indifferently. He looked at the city lord of Moon City. Suddenly, the city lord felt as if he was being stared at by a terrifying beast. Whoosh! The next moment, Yi Shiwen appeared in front of the Moon City lord. "Fool! How dare you attack in front of me? This is my domain. If I want you to live, you will live. If I want you to die, you will die." The city lord of Moon City revealed a proud smile. An expert with an unparalleled physical body like Yi Shiwen was indeed difficult to deal with, but it wasn't impossible. It was indeed terrifying to be attacked by them. However, this was also his domain. In this domain, he was the ultimate ruler. Countless moonlight soared into the sky. This was the effect of the moon law. It transformed into divine chains and bound Yi Shiwen tightly. In this place, the laws of the Moon City's city lord had been strengthened to an unimaginable level. Yi Shiwen seemed to be stuck in a quagmire. Then, countless moon steels appeared once again and fell down like raindrops. It was unknown how many devil gods were being suppressed in each moon steel. However, all of them had manifested at this time and rushed towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. Bang! 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 The moon steels fell crazily. Almost in an instant, they all fell on Yi Shiwen's body. However, these moon steels were blocked by the martial honorable seal. Every time the martial honorable seal and the moon steels collided, a terrifying explosion would erupt. However, the martial honorable seal was not broken. On the contrary, its golden light of virtue was becoming more and more dazzling. Just like its owner, Yi Shiwen, it was becoming stronger and stronger. It should be said that Yi Shiwen's skills were gradually strengthening. Under the blessing of the golden light of virtue, the martial honorable seal was already a peak celestial master Dao tool. Yi Shiwen's skills were originally unable to completely unleash its power. But now, as Yi Shiwen's skills were improving at a terrifying speed, the power of the martial honorable seal was naturally also improving at a rapid pace. It seemed to have opened up a brand new peak. Yi Shiwen was getting stronger at every moment. The martial honorable seal was also gradually strengthening. Do you still want to struggle? You can survive this kind of lineup. Aren't you going against the heavens? Break! Yi Shiwen roared. The moonlight god chains that bound him were instantly turned into nothingness by his magic power. He moved his body a little, and immediately there was a crackling sound. Although it seemed that he was in a dangerous situation and had entered the absolute domain of the Moon City Lord, it also isolated the physical honorable and the destructive stone honorable. If it was not as a last resort, the two of them would not be willing to enter the absolute domain of the Moon City Lord, even if they were now considered allies. However, this kind of alliance was too unreliable. They could fall out at any time because of the supreme ancestral symbol. How could the two of them really trust the Moon City Lord? Going against the heavens? This is just the beginning. I will still kill you all. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes. There was a sense of extreme danger in his eyes. The city lord of the Moon City just smiled indifferently. More and more moonlight divine law chains rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Each of them was like a divine dragon and had endless power. Yi Shiwen only took a step forward. In his hand, a long blade formed by the gung metal ancestor Qi appeared. The Moon City Lord's pupils shrank slightly. Last time, he had been defeated by the long blade formed by the gung metal ancestor Qi. His head had been smashed into pieces. It could be said that it had left a deep impression on him. Naturally, he was afraid of Yi Shiwen's treasure blade. Whoosh! Yi Shiwen brandished his blade, and suddenly, blade shadows burst out in the sky. It didn't matter whether it was the moonlight, divine chains, or the moon steel. None of them could get close to him. Countless of them were destroyed by his blade and were annihilated. Although it only took a breath of time for everything to recover, it was enough for Yi Shiwen. At this time, Yi Shiwen had already rushed to the front of the Moon City Lord. He had penetrated through the layers of space defenses and arrived in front of him. The long blade swept up a terrifying blade light that was millions of miles long and slashed down. The Moon City immediately appeared around a Moon City Lord, protecting him within. This was his core absolute domain. The blade light slashed into the Moon City Lord. Suddenly, endless explosions occurred. Both sides were in a deadlock. The skills of both sides were competing, and the nomological laws of both sides were also devouring and crushing each other. The Moon City Lord, who should have had the absolute upper hand, soon discovered that he could no longer gain the upper hand. Little by little, Yi Shiwen had turned the tables on him. However, he immediately understood that this was not Yi Shiwen turning the tables on him. Instead, his skills were growing crazily. In just one slash, his skills had improved a lot from beginning to end. When will this be the end? This is actually not his limit. The Moon City Lord couldn't believe it. Yi Shiwen obviously did not suddenly improve because of some enlightenment during the battle. It must have something to do with the fruit he had eaten before. What was it? Such a stalemate lasted for a full quarter of an hour. For a top master like an Empyrean, they could exchange tens of thousands of moves in an instant. But now, they were completely frozen in a single move. One could imagine how intense the situation was. Not good. The Moon City Lord suddenly felt that Yi Shiwen's skills had finally improved to a terrifying level. Yi Shiwen could compare to him and even surpass him. Boom! The long blade formed by the gung metal ancestral Qi cut his Moon City in half in an instant. It was like a butcher dismembering an ox. With just one simple slash, his entire Moon City was cut in half. The blade light fell on his body. Just like before, the gung metal ancestral Qi could originally hurt the Moon City Lord. Yi Shiwen could do it back then, let alone now. Bang! The Moon City Lord was hit, and his body flew out. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his entire body collapsed into pieces. Yi Shiwen's slash was too terrifying, and its power was too great. However, when this slash hit the Moon City Lord, the absolute domain of the Moon City Lord broke. The Physique Supreme and the Destructive Stone Supreme, who had been waiting on the side, finally couldn't hold back and rushed forward. Get lost! The terrifying skills on Yi Shiwen's body surged wildly. In an instant, he blocked the Physique Supreme and the Destructive Stone Supreme outside his body. At this time, his skills had finally reached a peak. The World Tree Fruit had been completely digested. He had finally entered the peak of the 8th realm. Chapter 3694. After a period of digestion, Yi Shiwen finally completely swallowed the World Tree Fruit. His martial power had truly reached the peak of the 8th realm. In an instant, he shook off the two experts who had rushed over. At this time, in terms of cultivation power, he was already on par with peak celestial venerables. He was not inferior to them. However, the two of them had still achieved their goal. They had stopped Yi Shiwen from continuing his pursuit of the Moon City Lord. This had won the Moon City Lord some crucial time. Huff, huff, huff. Fresh blood dripped down continuously. The body of the City Lord of Moon City had finally reassembled. However, there were many cracks on the surface of his body. He was almost chopped into pieces by Yi Shiwen's blade. He only felt that his back was incomparably cold. Yi Shiwen was far more terrifying than he had expected. This slash really reminded him of the fear he felt when he was forced to kill by Yi Shiwen. At that time, he was almost killed by Yi Shiwen, but he didn't expect that the fear would repeat itself. Damn it. Honorable Wu, I will kill you. The Moon City Lord was enraged to the extreme. What kind of person was he? He was high and mighty and had lived like a prince for countless years. But now he was forced to such a state. Kill me? Do you still have a chance? Yi Shiwen looked extremely calm. Today, all of you will die here. At this time, he had already stepped into the peak of the 8th level. In terms of skills, he could even compare to a peak heavenly venerate. However, this was still not enough. Among the peak heavenly venerables, there was also demon venerate Rahu and middle heavenly venerables who were far stronger than ordinary peak heavenly venerables. Demon venerate Luoho was an outstanding talent of the demonic epic. As for a middle Empyrean, He relied on his own strength to easily suppress Moon City's city lord. That was the true peak of Empyreans. However, more importantly, his future opponents would not allow him to stop here. Whether it was the Chaos Overlord or those old monsters that could rival the Chaos Overlord, they were all existences that he could not ignore. After the primal Chaos Tyrant Venerate came out, the first person to seek trouble was Shao Chun. Furthermore, those old monsters wanted to kill the martial epic's heavenly Tao. They were all great enemies that Shao Chun could not avoid. He had to grow faster. Thus, in his eyes, these peak heavenly venerates had already become his prey. Arrogant, Tizun said coldly. Whether I'm arrogant or not, you'll know once you try. Yi Shiwen shouted loudly. But in the next moment, countless forces burst out of his body as he entered the state of human unification. Yi Shiwen was already comparable to a peak celestial master. Now that he had entered the human unification state, his power had increased explosively. However, he hadn't broken through the boundary of a celestial master. At the same time, this also proved that Yi Shiwen still had potential that could be excavated at this time. He hadn't truly reached the limit yet. Yi Shiwen's previous idea was also feasible. Damn it, it's this guy again. But how long do you think you can last? The destructive stone venerable had already reached his limit when he saw Yi Shiwen repeatedly using the supreme ancestral symbol. At the same time, his desire for the supreme ancestral symbol had also reached its limit. If he could make use of the supreme ancestral symbol, his cultivation would rise to an unimaginable level. If he truly became a supreme powerhouse of the universe, even a peak Empyrean wouldn't be his match. It won't last long, but it's enough to kill you, Yi Shiwen said. In this state, the consumption of energy was much greater than before. The enhancement of the supreme ancestral symbol was also related to Yi Shiwen himself. If Yi Shiwen could only display the strength of an ordinary peak Empyrean before, then now that his cultivation had improved, the enhancement of the supreme ancestral symbol would naturally be even greater. Boom! A violent force erupted from Yi Shiwen's body. In an instant, he disappeared without a trace. The pupils of the physical venerable shrank. He realized that he couldn't see Yi Shiwen's figure after he opened his magic eyes. Whoosh! In the next second, Yi Shiwen appeared in front of him. Die. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Yi Shiwen clenched his fist and turned it into a huge 6 paths of reincarnation disc. This 6 paths of reincarnation disc instantly suppressed the physical venerable. You're courting death. The physical venerable roared and met the 6 paths of reincarnation disc with a punch. Bang! With a loud explosion, the 2 fists fiercely collided in midair. Then, everyone heard a miserable shriek. This scream actually came from the physical venerable. The physical venerable retreated a few steps. His entire arm hung limp, and he couldn't move it anymore. In the battle with Yi Shiwen just now, he had fallen into a disadvantageous position, and one of his arms had been directly crippled. Previously, Yi Shiwen's cultivation was at a disadvantage. However, this time, the physical venerable was at a complete disadvantage. After Yi Shiwen's cultivation increased crazily, their positions were completely reversed. How was this possible? The physical venerable couldn't believe it. At this moment, he seemed to understand why the Moon City Lord had been completely suppressed by Yi Shiwen previously. At that time, Yi Shiwen hadn't reached such a terrifying level. Do you still think you can kill me now? Yi Shiwen directly rushed in front of the physical venerable. Taking advantage of the fact that the Moon City Lord was seriously injured and couldn't attack, he attacked again. His target was naturally the physical venerable that he had injured. A terrifying pressure instantly crushed down. The physical venerable retreated again and again. He didn't dare to confront Yi Shiwen at this moment. However, at this point, how could Yi Shiwen let him escape? There wasn't much time left for him. After he entered the state of human unification, his perception had improved a lot. He could already sense that Demon Venerable Luo Ho was returning and that the Middle Celestial Venerable was entangling him in the distance. The current situation was completely reversed from before. Previously, it was the Middle Celestial Venerable who wanted to return to support, and Demon Venerable Luo Ho was entangling him. Now, it was Demon Venerable Luo Ho who wanted to return. After Yishuan entered the human unification and erupted his strength, Demon Venerable Luo Ho felt it almost immediately. He naturally understood how terrifying an expert of this level was. What he understood, the Middle Celestial Venerable naturally also understood and wouldn't let him succeed. However, if Demon Venerable Luo Ho wanted to return desperately, the Middle Celestial Venerable might not be able to delay him for long. Therefore, there wasn't much time left for him. Boom! Yi Shiwen suddenly stomped on the ground, and his figure instantly flew out. His speed was so fast that it shattered the entire epic space. He was like a Tyrannosaurus that was advancing at full speed and directly caught up with the supreme body in front of him. Rip! Almost with a ripping sound, a terrifying scene happened. Yi Shiwen's hands glowed with the light of martial arts law. He directly tore apart the absolute domain and core of the physical venerable. All the materialized world was torn into nothingness. It was not a divine ability, nor was it a law. It was just a terrifying power that was able to achieve such a shocking scene. At the same time, Yishuan had already arrived in front of the physical venerable. The seventh metal ancestral chi in his hand transformed into a long blade and fiercely slashed towards the physical venerable. Stop! At this time, the destructive stone venerable finally reacted. The scene just now seemed to have taken a long time to describe, but it actually happened in an instant. It was just that Yi Shiwen's performance was too terrifying, and it shocked everyone. Yi Shiwen didn't even turn his head. Instead, the revered martial seal that was rotating above his head suddenly flew out. It rose against the wind and transformed into a huge divine mountain. Then, the mountain fiercely pressed down towards the destructive stone statue. It wasn't to kill the destructive stone venerable, but just to stop him. At this time, among the three people, the Moon City Lord was seriously injured and couldn't come to support immediately. The destructive stone venerable was also blocked by the martial venerable seal. Only the physical venerable was left to fight against Yi Shiwen. The physical venerable was forced into a dead end, but he wasn't discouraged at all. On the contrary, his hostility was really forced out. He roared and grinned. He held the long spear in his other hand and faced Yi Shiwen's spear head-on. He wanted to catch Yi Shiwen off guard. You want to kill me? I will kill you first. However, Yi Shiwen didn't move, and the seventh metal long blade in his hand slashed down. Bang! There was a loud roar, and the long blade slashed on the long spear. Two peerless weapons broke out. The gap between the skills of the two sides was vividly reflected here at this time. Although the seventh metal ancestral chi was unparalleled in attack, the long spear in the hands of the physical venerable was not bad. It had drunk the blood of many strong enemies, but now a crack appeared in the long blade formed by the seventh metal ancestral chi. Buzz! There was a loud, buzzing sound, and the spear was trembling. The terrible power rushed to the body of the long spear, and it was trembling violently. Even the arms of the physical venerable were trembling. At this time, in terms of absolute skills, he had completely fallen into a disadvantage. The person who was being suppressed was replaced by him. Again, let me see how long you can last. The divine brilliance of the seventh metal ancestral chi in Yi Shiwen's hand was more blazing, and it once again turned into a long blade and slashed down. Clang, clang, clang. Countless blade shadows slashed down, and each slash made a loud sound. Each time, the cracks in the hands of the physical venerable increased. It was shaken by the violent power. Bang! Finally, the long spear in the hands of the physical venerable was shaken and flew out. He couldn't hold the long spear anymore, and his whole arm exploded. Puff! The physical venerable flew out upside down, and a mouthful of blood essence spurted out. Yi Shiwen took a step forward and chased after him. The seventh metal long blade slashed out thousands of blade lights and directly slashed the body of the physical venerable. The physique supreme's body was already densely covered with cracks, but it finally couldn't hold on any longer and collapsed, and his soul got chopped by the gung metal blade. It got destroyed in an instant and died a tragic death at Yishiwen's hands. Chapter 3695. Physique Supreme is dead. Demon Elder Scarlet Serpent, who was watching the battle from the sidelines, was the first to discover this. In fact, it could be said that he was the first to react. His devil power erupted almost instinctively. Yishiwen gave him an extremely dangerous feeling at this time. He hadn't felt this way for a very, very long time. In the demon realm, the only person who could make him feel this way, apart from those old farts in the past, was Demon Lord Rahu. Yishiwen gave him an even more dangerous feeling than Demon Venerable Luo Ho, because Demon Venerable Luo Ho wouldn't just kill him like this. A peak heavenly master wasn't a roadside cabbage. He was killed just like that. A chill rushed from the soles of his feet to his head. He almost instinctively wanted to join the battle. But at this moment, Heavenly Talisman Immortal stepped out and blocked in front of him. If you want to go, you have to go through me first. When Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable said this, his mood was extremely carefree. Earlier, he was blocked by Red Lotus Demon Venerable. Unable to advance or retreat, he was gritting his teeth in anger. But now, the situation was reversed in a short time. At this moment, Crimson Serpent Demon suddenly remembered that there was still Heavenly Talisman Immortal who was being watched by him. But now, the situation was reversed. He was immediately depressed. The spectating Heavenly Venerables also suddenly woke up. At first, they seemed to be a little numb from watching. They opened their eyes wide and didn't dare to miss a single thing. If they blinked, they might miss something very important. Now, the facts had confirmed their guess. Yishiwen had indeed killed a body supreme in a short period of time. That was a terrifying heavenly master of the physique cultivation era. He was a physique cultivator. It could be said that he was very difficult to kill. Since ancient times, there were people who wanted to kill a physique supreme, but they all failed. There was even a powerful heavenly master like Demon Venerable Luo Ho who wanted to kill a physique supreme. But in the end, he failed and escaped. However, such a powerful heavenly master with legendary experience died in Yishiwen's hands. If they didn't see it with their own eyes, who would believe it? This is simply going to turn the world upside down. 3 peak Empyreans, including the one he killed before. The fall of 3 peak Empyreans is enough to weaken 3 epics. Terrifying, too terrifying. No matter what the outcome of today's battle is, the name of Martial Exalt will probably resound through the many ancient eras. All the spectating heavenly venerables discussed amongst themselves. However, none of them were as shocked as the 2 heavenly venerables on the battlefield, especially the Moon City Lord, whose eyes were wide open. After all, he wasn't present when Yishiwen killed the Shadow Evil Venerable. Moreover, the Azure Heavenly Venerable was caught off guard and eventually lost to Yishiwen. Therefore, he did not take it to heart, but now he had seen it with his own eyes. Not only had the Supreme Physique not been caught off guard, but he had also not used any tricks at all. He had completely crushed the Supreme Physique purely with his own tyrannical strength. Completely tyrannical strength. The destructive Stone Lord's red eyes became even more terrifying. He was also deeply shocked and felt Yishiwen's murderous intent even more. After Yishiwen killed the Supreme Physique, he kept it in his inner world, crushed it into blood essence, and poured it into the world tree. He could feel that his strength had increased to a terrifying level. The Supreme Ancestral Symbol's efficiency had not reached its limit yet, and it could still be improved. I have to finish this battle quickly. Yishiwen felt that the cells in his body were being torn apart, and a terrifying power was wreaking havoc in them. While the Supreme Ancestral Symbol gave him great strength, it also made him feel extremely dangerous at all times. Whoosh! Yishiwen moved again, and his target this time was the Moon City Lord. At this time, The Moon City Lord had just recovered from Yi Shiwen's series of attacks, and had just recovered. At this time, Yi Shiwen had already pounced on him. The Moon City Lord's reaction was not slow either. He surrounded himself in layers of space, and an incomparably huge Moon City protected him within. However, it was once again broken by Yi Shiwen. It was different from the previous stalemate. This time, Yi Shiwen broke through the defense of the Moon City Lord. However, it was very easy to break through the defense. On his hands, the light of martial arts laws bloomed, and in an instant, it was torn apart. It could not stop Yi Shiwen's advance at all. Seeing this scene, the Moon City Lord's pupils shrank slightly. Everyone said that Yi Shiwen had become stronger, but exactly how much stronger he had become could be seen from this question. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind, but Yi Shiwen would definitely not give him a chance to escape. He could only fight. At this time, he finally understood what the Supreme Physique was thinking. It was not that he did not want to escape, but that he could not escape. Yi Shiwen's aura surged and directly locked onto him. If he wanted to escape, it would be impossible for him to do so. Roar! The Moon City Lord was forced into a dead end, and he immediately erupted. Countless power of the moon swept into a frenzy, sweeping towards Yi Shiwen, blocking him. Yi Shiwen's performance made countless people's glasses fall to the ground. He simply did not even move and directly rushed forward, smashing the power of the moon into nothingness. Just like that, he rushed in front of the Moon City Lord. His full head of black hair was scattered on his shoulders, fluctuating along with his surging spiritual power. It was ostentatious and domineering. At the most critical moment, Yi Shiwen finally blasted out a punch. The fist intent soared into the sky, shaking the vast universe. The boundless era blasted towards the Moon City Lord. The Moon City Lord had no way to stop it all. At this time, Yi Shiwen was already strong to the limit, and one punch penetrated all the Moon City Lord's defenses. Die! At the same time, the destructive stone Venerable also made a move. He wanted to save the Moon City Lord. He also understood the principle of interdependence, but he obviously could not keep up with Yi Shiwen's speed. After his strength had skyrocketed, not only was his strength terrifyingly strong, but his speed had also increased to a level far beyond his previous level. Even the destructive stone Venerable, who was in a higher realm than Yi Shiwen, could not catch up. He could only choose to besiege Yi Shiwen. Since he could not catch up, he simply did not chase after Yi Shiwen. He directly blasted towards Yi Shiwen. The destructive stone Venerable attacked with all his strength. The power of this attack was naturally imaginable. It formed a huge crack in the sky and swept towards Yi Shiwen at lightning speed. In the face of such an attack, Yi Shiwen did not dodge at all. He let this terrifying attack, which was wrapped in stone chi, hit Yi Shiwen's body. The destructive stone Venerable had underestimated Yi Shiwen. He thought that Yi Shiwen would definitely turn around to rescue him. If it was the Yi Shiwen from before, this would definitely be the right thing to do. However, the current Yi Shiwen forcibly endured this attack. The stone chi spread to Yi Shiwen's body, and in an instant, Yi Shiwen was petrified. The destructive stone Venerable's face showed a hint of joy. He had finally stopped Yi Shiwen, and even made Yi Shiwen forcibly endure his attack. However, the proud expression on his face only lasted for a few seconds, and then it froze. This was because Yi Shiwen, who had been petrified, moved. It was just a slight shake, and the stone chi that had spread to Yi Shiwen's body had dissipated completely. It could not pose any threat to Yi Shiwen at all. Yi Shiwen's body swayed in a strange pattern, and he had completely resolved the destructive stone Venerable's attack. Everyone was stunned. Yi Shiwen had to deal with the destructive stone Venerable's attack with all his strength before, but now he could resolve it so easily. This. Many celestial masters could only say this, they could not even say a word. They were frightened by Yi Shiwen's terrifying way of confrontation. How did he do this? Asked a celestial master with widened eyes. For Yi Shiwen, he had easily blocked the destructive stone Venerable's attack, but for the Moon City Lord, it was a nightmare. Yi Shiwen's fist energy swept across the sky and directly hit his body. Boom! The Moon City Lord's body was blasted into pieces again. Now, he could not even do basic resistance. His physical body was shattered again, and the Moon City Lord's spirit was revealed. Yi Shiwen took a step forward again, and the Moon City Lord's spirit was blasted into pieces with a punch. The Moon City Lord had fallen. Many celestial masters had already guessed that this might be the next result. After all, the previous body venerable did not last long, but they could not help but be shocked when they saw it for themselves. After all, Yi Shiwen's attack speed was too fast, and the speed at which he killed was too fast. It did not seem like he was killing a peak celestial master. It was like he was casually cutting cabbages on the roadside, and he killed them casually. There were a total of 5 peak heavenly masters. However, 3 of them had died in Yi Shiwen's hands in a short period of time. All of them had died in Yi Shiwen's hands. Only Lord Destructive Stone and Lord Scarlet Serpent were left. The Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable was delayed by the Heaven Talisman Immortal because he did not participate. Otherwise, the consequences would be unpredictable. Now, no one believed that the Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable and the others were Yi Shiwen's opponents. The only mystery was how long they could last. This traitor is finally dead, Yi Shiwen said faintly. He did not feel the slightest bit excited after killing the Moon City Lord, but the surging spiritual power in his body continued to rise. It's your turn next. Are you ready? Yi Shiwen looked at the Destructive Stone Venerable, his eyes still burning with fighting spirit. Chapter 3696. The Annihilation Stone Venerable immediately felt a terrifying sense of crisis sweeping through his entire body like a tide. It was as if he was being stared at by the most dangerous, ominous beast. Originally, Yi Shiwen didn't target him, so he didn't feel that it was scary. But now, when Yi Shiwen beheaded the other 2 people, this scary feeling suddenly emerged. Yi Shiwen was undoubtedly at his strongest at this time. He instantly retreated millions of miles, wanting to escape, but his combat power had soared to a limit at this time. You want to leave at this time? It's too late. Yi Shiwen's cold voice came over. The Destructive Stone Venerate shuddered, and countless strands of stone chi spread out from his body, forming a world of stone chi that protected him. Just as he evolved the stone chi world, he saw that Yi Shiwen had already appeared in front of him. Fast! 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 Yi Shiwen's speed was too fast. Almost in an instant, he had already rushed in front of the Destructive Stone Elder. The Stone Chi world released by the Destructive Stone Elder was destroyed by Yi Shiwen in an instant. He didn't need to use magical power to resolve it at all. Just by relying on his terrifying speed, everything could be destroyed. The speed law evolved to the extreme at this time, turning into a terrifying attack. The defense that the Destructive Stone Elder had just set up was already shattered. It couldn't stop Yi Shiwen's advancement at all. In just an instant, it had already collapsed. However, he was unwilling to give up like this. Countless stone chi was condensed and turned into millions of stone soldiers, rushing in the direction of the Destructive Stone Elder. Want to stop me? 3,000 martial arts incarnations. Yi Shiwen's body swayed slightly and directly transformed 3,000 martial arts incarnations, and then attacked in all directions. The millions of stone soldiers couldn't get close to Yi Shiwen at all. With Yi Shiwen's current means, whether it was a group battle or a one-on-one battle, there was nothing to be afraid of. The Destructive Stone Elder's face changed several times in an instant. Yi Shiwen's performance was too strong, and he didn't dare to fight back. At the same time, he also knew that Yi Shiwen was so terrifying because he had entered the state of human conformity. Otherwise, there was still hope for him to protect himself. Therefore, he could only continue to avoid the fight. He didn't dare to fight directly with Yi Shiwen, and Yi Shiwen also understood this. He wouldn't let his plan succeed. The long blade formed from the Gungjin ancestral chi in his hand swept out fiercely, turning into a huge golden waterfall that slashed the sky and the earth apart, directly chopping down towards the Stone Lord of Destruction. Boom! As the waterfall slashed down, Violent explosions could be heard everywhere in the world. Shock waves from the violent explosions swept out everywhere, locking onto the Annihilation Stone Venerable in an instant, making it impossible for him to escape. Then, the waterfall slashed down on the Annihilation Stone Venerable. Boundless divine radiance filled the space between the heavens and the earth, making it impossible for anyone to clearly see what exactly had been discovered. When the crowd was able to see a little more clearly, they saw that the destructive stone venerable did not explode as many people had imagined. On the contrary, he put his palms together and forcefully received the attack. Not only was there the laws of the way of the stone around him, but there was also another type of law that should not have appeared on him. The laws of destruction. This was a terrifying law that possessed the power of destruction. This law had been born for the sake of destruction since its inception. As long as it existed, it would be on the list of its targets to destroy. The Annihilation Stone Venerable actually possessed the laws of destruction. This was simply beyond everyone's imagination. The Stone Tool era that the Annihilation Stone Venerable lived in was purely an era of the Stone Path. All martial arts techniques and everything else were related to the Stone Path. However, the laws of destruction had appeared on his body now. This was a law that was completely different from the Stone Path laws, yet it had appeared on his body. This was a law and a trump card that he had never displayed before. At this time, everyone recalled the cold, destructive intent of the Annihilation Stone Venerable's title. This was the laws of destruction. It didn't mean to destroy everything, but it meant the laws of destruction that he cultivated. For the heavenly venerables of other eras, cultivating one more law was also very magical, but it wasn't impossible. It was common knowledge that there were thousands of laws in the world. Even the performance of the same law in different eras was completely different. It was already very difficult to cultivate one law to the extreme. Cultivating several laws at the same time was undoubtedly a way of delaying oneself. Even someone as strong as Yi Shiwen, who cultivated 3,000 martial arts at the same time with the help of the mysterious space, actually only focused on some of them. The others were cultivated at the same time. It couldn't be considered as cultivating all of them at the same time. Prioritizing. It wasn't that Yi Shiwen couldn't cultivate. It was purely because he didn't have so much energy and wealth to cultivate at the same time. Even Yi Shiwen had no choice but to do so, let alone others. The Annihilation Stone Venerable, in addition to consuming too much energy and possibly conflicting with the great path that he cultivated at the same time, was most importantly an era that purely cultivated the Stone Path. This was far inferior to the Martial Path era, which was an era where complex laws existed at the same time. Therefore, no one expected that the Annihilation Stone Venerable actually had such a trick up his sleeve. No one had expected it to be able to block Yi Shiwen's attack. Even Yi Shiwen hadn't expected the Annihilation Stone Venerable to have such an ability. The laws of destruction are profound. They aren't inferior to the Stone Path laws at all. Yi Shiwen withdrew the Gungjin ancestral qi and said faintly, "It was normal for a celestial master to cultivate several laws at the same time. However, it was very rare for two laws to be cultivated to the extreme. In other words, it was simply impossible." Yi Shiwen had separated the cultivation of Sword Dao from his own martial Dao, and had transformed it into a martial Dao incarnation. However, the cultivation of Venerable Sword and Venerable Yi Shiwen were worlds apart. In fact, they weren't even on the same level. The Annihilation Stone Venerable finally breathed a sigh of relief after dodging this fatal blow. He said, "This secret of mine has never been exposed. I didn't expect you to force me to this point. I'm actually not a creature of the Stone Age. Instead, I'm a willpower born from the laws of destruction. Later, I reincarnated into the Stone Age by chance. Finally, I have the cultivation I have today. No one has ever forced me to this point. You are the first." The Annihilation Stone Venerable's laws of destruction began to emerge and completely integrated with his Stone Path laws. Obviously, this wasn't the first time he had done this. After the two laws were integrated together, his strength had increased a lot. Obviously, this was his trump card. Among these peak celestial masters, the Annihilation Stone Venerable, who wasn't considered too outstanding, was the strongest. You have forced me to this point. Only death awaits you. I don't even need to make a move. As long as the time is up, you will die. The Annihilation Stone Venerable crossed his arms and looked at Yi Shiwen coldly. He had absolute confidence that he could exhaust Yi Shiwen to death. He might not be Yi Shiwen's opponent in this state, but he was confident that he could protect himself. As long as he could protect himself, he didn't necessarily have to die. I'm surprised that you have such a trump card. However, if you think that you can drag me to death like this, then you are gravely mistaken. Yi Shiwen sneered. Then he took a step forward and instantly rushed in front of the Annihilation Stone Venerable. The martial Venerable seal suddenly flew out of his head. The big hand holding the martial Venerable seal seemed to expand against the wind. It grew bigger and bigger, and then smashed toward the Annihilation Stone Venerable. Rumble. Wherever the martial Venerable seal passed, the entire world was torn apart. The terrifying scene of atoms being blown to pieces could be seen everywhere. After the Annihilation Stone Venerable had improved his cultivation, Yi Shiwen's attacks had also become more targeted. They had become even more terrifying. A blood-red color appeared on his body. That was the scene of all the blood vessels in his body exploding. Previously, Yi Shiwen had been suppressing the supreme ancestral symbol's energy in his body. That was because the eruption of the supreme ancestral symbol's energy wasn't a good thing for him. However, now that the Annihilation Stone Venerable's strength had improved after integrating with the Annihilation Law, he couldn't hold back anymore. What? He's still hiding his strength? A celestial master exclaimed. This was because Yi Shiwen hadn't reached his limit yet. How much more could he break through when he was in the state of human-one unification? This was simply unbelievable. The Annihilation Stone Venerable also opened his eyes wide. He didn't expect that Yi Shiwen still had such an ability and was hiding such strength. Almost instantly, Yi Shiwen's attack had already arrived in front of the Annihilation Stone Venerable. The martial Venerable seal was like a Tai sacred mountain that was about to suppress him. The Annihilation Stone Venerable struggled desperately. He wanted to break the suppression of the martial Venerable seal. However, he couldn't do anything. In that instant, he was overwhelmed by Yi Shiwen's aura. He couldn't resist at all. Boom! The Annihilation Stone Venerable was directly hit. Whether it was the Annihilation Law or the Stone Dao Law, it couldn't stop Yi Shiwen's footsteps. It couldn't even resist a little. It was directly destroyed by Yi Shiwen with lightning speed. Then, the martial Venerable seal fell on the Annihilation Stone Venerable's body. The Annihilation Stone Venerable had already reached the peak of body cultivation. However, he was still blasted into pieces after being hit by the martial Venerable seal. The spirit hidden within was also completely destroyed by Yi Shiwen's blade. Chapter 3697. After killing the destructive Stone Lord, everyone's eyes fell on Crimson Serpent Demon. Out of the 5 heavenly venerables that besieged Yi Shiwen, only Crimson Serpent Demon was left. The pressure on Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable had increased a lot. It could be said that there were 5 of them against Yi Shiwen and Heaven Talisman Immortal at the beginning. But now it had become 1 against 2. This kind of one-sided pressure instantly increased to the limit. Crimson Serpent Demon finally reacted to being surrounded by Yi Shiwen and Heaven Talisman Immortal. He had already reacted, but there was no way to escape. Heaven Talisman Immortal had already taken the initiative to block all his escape routes. Originally, he came to restrain Heaven Talisman Immortal. But now, the situation was completely reversed. He was being restrained by Heaven Talisman Immortal. At this moment, he couldn't escape even if he wanted to. Yi Shiwen also turned his eyes to Crimson Serpent Demon. His injuries had worsened further. Killing the destructive Stone Lord had worsened his injuries. Fortunately, so far, it was still within his control. After his cultivation advanced to the peak of the 8th realm, all aspects of his abilities had improved significantly. The Scarlet Serpent Demon Lord instantly erupted. His entire body ignited with blood-colored magic power. The blazing radiance filled up the entire era. It was as if he had turned into a blood-colored frenzy as he fled into the distance. "You're only trying to escape now," Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable shouted. She was already prepared. Countless law talismans erupted in an instant, turning into law chains that formed a huge net of law chains that trapped Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable within. Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable's movement was stopped, and his speed was directly slowed down. However, Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable had underestimated Scarlet Serpent Demon Venerable's determination to escape. After being left alone, he quickly understood his situation. If he couldn't escape, the outcome that awaited him wouldn't be any better than others. Heaven Talisman Immortal's giant net, formed by the law of talismans, couldn't stop him. He directly broke through the net and escaped. However, Yishuan had already arrived in the split second when he was being delayed. "Emperor, trampling the world!" Yishuan shouted loudly. Then, his foot ferociously stomped down like a huge mountain. His target was right in front of the Scarlet Serpent Demon Elder. Boom! Yishuan's big foot trampled a huge hole in the intersection of this era. Endless chaos rushed out of it. It was trampled out by Yishuan. The Crimson Serpent Demon Venerable stopped in his tracks in front of this incomparably huge hole. He looked at the huge hole with a gloomy expression. If he had reacted just a little slower, he would have been stepped on. If that had happened, the consequences would have been unimaginable. And this was merely a casual step of Yishuan's. However, it was already no less than a full-strength strike from Yishuan. Yishuan didn't know when this person, who he had never taken seriously, had grown to such an extent. From being able to kill him casually to being able to kill him now. Behind him, Yishuan walked step by step. He seemed slow but was actually fast. In an instant, he had already traveled through time and space. He arrived in front of the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder and looked at him coldly. The killing intent in Yishuan's eyes was boiling and overflowing. Previously, when he and the Moon City Lord were both injured, the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder had almost caught up and killed him. Now, the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder and the Moon City Lord had found people to besiege him. It could even be said that if it wasn't for his good luck, he would have died in the hands of the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. Such a trusted enemy was also a peak heavenly master in the demon era. One could imagine the killing intent in the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder's heart. Now that the Moon City Lord had been killed, only the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder was left. "Marshal Venerable, how dare you kill him?" Demon Venerable Luo Ho's roar came from afar. Although he was far away, the Demon Venerable Luo Ho still managed to find a way to find out about the situation here. Things that were originally in the bag turned out to be like this. No one could have imagined that Yishuan would obtain the final victory. Not only did he win, but he even killed the other heavenly masters, leaving only the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. The Demon Venerable Luo Ho's voice was full of threats. However, Yishuan only sneered and ignored him. He looked at the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder and said with a faint smile, "Why? Do you think you can escape?" Soon, the Middle Heavenly Master's voice came from afar. "Demon Venerable Luo Ho, if you want to return, you have to ask me if I'm willing." Then, another shocking battle ensued. The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder's eyes were cold. He just looked at Yishuan. His eyes seemed to be able to freeze everything. At this moment, he also understood that it was impossible for him to escape from Yishuan. In the distance, the Demon Venerable Luo Ho was also held up by the Middle Heavenly Master. It was impossible for him to help him. In that case, he could only fight with Yishuan. If that's the case, then let's fight. At this moment, the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder still displayed his demeanor as the supreme of the demon era. He didn't just blindly escape. In a situation where he couldn't avoid, he still displayed the demeanor of fighting to the death in the past. "Very well, you are qualified to be killed by me like this." The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder was ferocious, but Yishiwen was obviously even more ferocious. Facing the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder, Yishiwen didn't have the slightest bit of mercy. Boom! The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder didn't say much. His opponent grabbed towards the void. It was almost as if he had the power to pick up mountains and rivers. The chaos was torn apart, and a divine mountain was pulled out from it. Using the divine mountain as a weapon, he smashed it towards Yishiwen. At this moment, the aura of heaven and earth was in disorder. The entire era was trembling. Countless divine lights were blazing, and magic was rampaging. Come on. Yishiwen didn't retreat at all. He took a step forward like a rising dragon and descending phoenix. He directly rushed towards the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. In the endless divine brilliance, he twisted his body and flew up into the sky. He kicked out in the sky. It was domineering and unstoppable. Bang! A loud explosion was heard as Yishiwen's foot landed on the top of the divine mountain. Suddenly, the entire divine mountain was kicked into powder by Yishiwen. At this moment, a blood-red long whip appeared in the hand of the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. It was like a blood-red, demonic dragon. It opened its bloody mouth and rushed towards Yishiwen. He used his extreme strength for such an opportunity. He wanted to create such an opportunity. Yishiwen held the gung metal long blade in his hand and suddenly burst out. The long blade fought against the blood-red long whip. Clang! A loud roar was accompanied by a burst of flesh and blood. The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder retreated repeatedly. The muscles of his entire arm had burst open. His expression was incomparably dignified. Although he had already guessed Yishiwen's strength, he couldn't truly understand how terrifying Yishiwen had become if he didn't personally participate in the battle. Most importantly, Yishiwen's cultivation in the path of physique cultivation had reached the pinnacle. Even the destructive stone Venerable and the physique Venerable suffered a great loss when they fought against Yishiwen in this aspect, let alone the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. He was surprised, but at the same time, these were all within his expectations. After gaining the upper hand in one move, Yishiwen didn't give the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder a chance to breathe. He held the gung metal long blade in his hand and instantly launched a crazy attack on the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. This series of attacks was like a storm. It was so oppressive that it made people feel suffocated. The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder also did his best to resist desperately. At this moment, he was forced into a desperate situation by Yishiwen. He didn't hide anything and attacked crazily. On the side, the heavenly talisman Immortal Venerable didn't make a move. Although she hated the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder to the bone, she also knew that her strength was actually on par with the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. If she attacked, it was hard to say whether she could defeat the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder. Therefore, she only watched and didn't make a move. She was guarding against the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder escaping and others joining the battle. Although she didn't have an overwhelming advantage over other peak Heavenly Venerables, she was more than enough to deter those Heavenly Venerables who wanted to take advantage of the situation. After all, she was also a peak Great Heavenly Venerable. She was an outstanding person and a pillar in countless ancient eras. The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder waved the blood-colored long whip. Countless demonic patterns emerged, forming one array after another to enhance the power of his long whip. This was the power of a Heavenly Venerable Dao tool. Even Dao tools couldn't achieve this level. It was really terrifying to the extreme. But even so, he was helpless in the face of Yishiwen. The big handprint that Yishiwen casually suppressed contained thousands of terrifying law talismans. It had unimaginable power. It could easily break his offensive and law talismans. Although the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder tried his best to resist, the combat power of both sides was obviously a level apart. Under such circumstances, even if he tried his best, he could only fight and retreat. He was not a match for Yishiwen at all. The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder was retreating step by step. His body kept exploding and turning into masses of blood mist. Bang! Finally, After the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder resisted Yi Shiwen's giant handprint, his body exploded on the spot. Even his spirit was severely injured. How could Yi Shiwen let go of such a good opportunity? The gung metal blade in his hand instantly attacked and killed the Crimson Serpent Demon Elder with one slash. The Crimson Serpent Demon Elder only let out a scream before he died in Yi Shiwen's hands. At this moment, a figure swept over from afar with a great momentum. Who else could it be if not Demon Venerable Luo Ho? At this moment, Demon Venerable Luo Ho stared at Yi Shiwen and said, "You actually dared to kill him." Chapter 3698. Demon Venerable Luohu exuded a terrifying aura. It was extremely dangerous, causing the entire era to tremble along with his rapid breathing. Many celestial venerables who were watching could sense an extremely dangerous aura from Demon Venerable Luohu. The entire era was in a state of extreme danger because of his anger. This made many people feel it in their hearts. Demon Venerable Luohu's killing intent wasn't concealed at all. Demon Venerable Luohu had said that this battle was the idea of the City Lord of Moon City and Demon Venerable Scarlet Serpent. However, it was absolutely impossible for someone like Demon Venerable Luohu to gather so many peak heavenly venerables. Yi Shiwen had killed Demon Venerable Luohu's incarnation, but that was a small matter. It was just an incarnation. Killing it was nothing. There was no need to risk his life to kill such a powerful heavenly venerable, because the price he had to pay was too high. Otherwise, shouldn't the first target be the middle heavenly venerable, the Fortune God dynasty's deputy emperor? Logically, the Ancient Era and the Fortune God dynasty were mortal enemies. The middle heavenly venerable was the deputy emperor of the Fortune God dynasty. He was the Fortune God dynasty's deputy emperor of the same age and was the supreme ruler of the Fortune world. Logically speaking, if he appeared in this place filled with Ancient Era's experts, he should be quickly surrounded and killed. However, there weren't many people who were willing to make a move. That was a peak heavenly venerable. How much price would they have to pay to surround and kill him? No one was willing to pay such a price and be taken advantage of by others. Moreover, if they really angered the Fortune God dynasty, even if they couldn't destroy all of the Ancient Eras, destroying one of them wouldn't be a problem. Who would dare to stand out at this time? These people had their own selfish motives and weren't willing to join forces. However, Demon Venerable Luohu had seen through them. Yi Shiwen's threat was too great. In time to come, there would be another middle heavenly venerable. Even if he wasn't a middle heavenly venerable, he would at least be able to solidify the title of Eastern Heavenly Venerable. The Fortune God dynasty would have another peak expert. This was the reason why he had gathered so many peak Empyreans. At his current level, it could be said that he was only half a step away from reaching that realm. His focus wasn't just on treasures, but on the development of the demonic path era. Clearly, in this epoch before the Great Apocalypse, the martial epic and their ancient epic had been in a constant state of decline. If the martial epic was stronger, then the ancient epic, including the demonic epic, would be weaker. However, he never expected that Yi Shiwen would not only pose a threat to them in the future, but he had already posed a threat now. The fall of 5 peak celestial masters could be easily guessed. This would involve the turmoil of several eras. These were things that he hadn't thought of when he made this plan. Yi Shiwen's growth rate was far beyond his imagination. Even if he felt that he had overestimated Yi Shiwen and found several peak celestial masters, he still failed in the end. Most importantly, the death of the other peak heavenly venerables was one thing, but the death of the Scarlet Serpent Archdevil was the true loss of the Devil Path epic. The Devil Path epic hadn't suffered such a huge loss even when they had seized the Moon City from the Fortune Divine Dynasty and organized the Battle of Moon City. Now, they had suffered losses because of Yi Shiwen. Not only did the Scarlet Serpent Archdevil lose, but also the Moon City City Lord, the newly promoted peak heavenly venerables. All of them had died here. He couldn't help but feel like his heart was dripping blood. He didn't even know how many of such experts there were in the demonic path epic. Yet they had all died here. There wasn't any large-scale operation, and they had died in such a meaningless manner. Yet the target they had besieged, Yi Shiwen, was fine. The Scarlet Serpent, Archdevil, wanted to vomit blood just thinking about it. This was the Devil Path epic, an era with a deep foundation. If it had been an ordinary era, losing a peak heavenly venerate might not have such a powerful figure to oversee it. So what if I killed them? Yi Shiwen looked coldly at Demon Venerable Luo Ho. In fact, Demon Venerable Luo Ho was very strong, but he was completely different from back then. Back then, just to kill an incarnation of Demon Venerable Luo Ho, he had already done his best. Now, he was fearless even when facing Demon Venerable Luo Ho. Then I'll kill you. Demon Venerable Luo Ho's eyes emitted an extremely dangerous aura, and he was about to attack. In the distance, the figure of the middle heavenly venerable was getting closer and closer. In just a moment, he had already reached Yi Shiwen's side. However, he didn't look very good, and he even looked a little embarrassed. Clearly, he had suffered some losses when fighting with Demon Venerable Luo Ho just now. That was why Demon Venerable Luo Ho had broken away to find trouble with Yi Shiwen. For a top expert like him, this was simply a great shame. Demon Venerable Luo Ho had paid a huge price to break away. Kill him? Did you ask me? Said the middle heavenly venerable. Kill me. Right now, Demon Venerable Luo Ho probably doesn't know what kind of situation he is in. Yi Shiwen sneered and said, does he still think he can completely defeat us now? Right now, we should be discussing whether we should kill him or not. As soon as Yi Shiwen's voice fell, Demon Venerable Luo Ho suddenly realized that he was already surrounded by Yi Shiwen, the middle heavenly venerable, and the Heaven Talisman Immortal, especially the Heaven Talisman Immortal. He didn't know when he had blocked his escape route. The three of them formed a triangular formation and surrounded him. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. He finally realized how dangerous the situation he was in right now was. It should be known that among the three of them, none of them were ordinary people. The strongest among them was the middle heavenly venerable, who was already not inferior to him. The Heaven Talisman Immortal was also a genuine peak heavenly venerable. Even if Yi Shiwen had withdrawn from the state of human convergence, his combat power was still at the level of a peak heavenly venerable. The three experts surrounded him. At this moment, he understood the situation when Yi Shiwen was surrounded and what kind of mood he was in. That's right, huh? He still doesn't know what kind of situation he is in. The middle heavenly venerable laughed loudly. The three of them almost didn't need to communicate. They quietly surrounded Demon Venerable Luo Ho. Middle heavenly venerable, you dare to kill me? Demon Venerable Luo Ho sneered and said, can you stop me if I want to leave? Cut the crap. You will know if I can stop you or not. Yi Shiwen said. At this moment, his skin began to crack, and the dense cracks began to get bigger and bigger. He had killed so many experts in a row. Even if he didn't delay much time and try to save as much time as possible, it still took a lot of time. At this moment, he was almost at his limit. There wasn't much time left. After a while, he could only withdraw from the state of human convergence. He could only kill Demon Venerable Luo Ho during this period of time. Boom! Yi Shiwen's body instantly erupted with terrifying magical power. Endless power erupted in an instant. Countless talisman puppets transformed into a terrifying energy tide and directly swept towards Demon Venerable Luo Ho. Demon Venerable Luo Ho couldn't help but look a little solemn in the face of this terrifying energy tide that swept towards Yi Shiwen. A demonic saber appeared in his hand. Countless magic condensed around the demonic saber and directly slashed towards Yi Shiwen's energy tide. The demonic saber easily slashed the sweeping talisman energy tide into nothingness. Yi Shiwen's eyes narrowed slightly. This casual slash could reflect the difference between Demon Venerable Luo Ho and other peak heavenly venerables. If it was Qi Lian Demon Venerable and the others, they would have to use all their strength to block it. However, Demon Venerable Luo Ho blocked it with just a casual slash. His skills were clearly more tyrannical than Qi Lian Demon Venerable. He was a true invincible expert among heavenly venerables. Unless it was an old monster of half-step sovereign, otherwise, no one could pose a huge threat to an expert of this level. On the other side, Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable had already launched an attack. Her eyes were filled with hatred as she pinched a seal. An incomparably huge talisman appeared in front of her. Then, a pen appeared in her hand, and she began to write a huge suppressed character on it. This talisman grew bigger and bigger, almost expanding in the wind. It turned into a huge cage and suppressed Demon Venerable Luo Ho. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable, so many years have passed. You haven't made much progress, but I'm completely different from before. Demon Venerable Luo Ho sneered and unscrupulously attacked Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable. After the long saber in his hand slashed through Yi Shiwen's energy tide, it almost instantly slashed towards Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable in the opposite direction. The huge talisman cage was completely destroyed by this slash. In just a moment, it was completely slashed in half. This slash was casual and didn't carry a trace of smoke or fire. It didn't seem like an ordinary blade technique. It was a true technique that was close to the path. In this aspect, Demon Venerable Luo Ho had really reached the extreme. Heaven Talisman Immortal Venerable snorted coldly and didn't say anything. In front of her, thousands of talismans were completely formed, and all of them turned into a terrifying attack that swept towards Demon Venerable Luo Ho. Every talisman had a huge Dao character written on it. The Dao character was the manifestation of the power of the Great Path. Every Dao character contained terrifying power, and now it was completely swept away. Demon Venerable Luo Ho also slashed with his saber, splitting into countless saber shadows that went against every Dao character. Demon Venerable Luo Ho, take this. Middle Heavenly Venerable also joined the battle. He instantly rushed in front of Demon Venerable Luo Ho and manifested the Law of Time, boosting his speed to the limit and turning it into a terrifying attack. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.